And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. And I have with me tonight Panda Sub 2000, who was kind enough to come on the show. Otherwise, there might not have been a show. You'll notice the other regular host, Mike, is out. He had a work emergency, so he will not be attending tonight. So we radically changed direction and topic, and everything changed the last minute.
And
Welcome to
yet it's
Retro
going to be
Roots.
the best show that we've ever done. I mean, can I just say, Nick, real quick? I feel like a heavy, heavy burden is off of all of our shoulders. There's no Matthews finally. The show can finally start getting good. Am I alone on this?
Which is to say, the show is going to be terrible.
It's gonna, yeah, absolutely be abysmal. Yeah,
and we've already lost viewers.
Yeah,
no Matthews, I'm out.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them.
We got a few people in chat. Cam was here a little earlier. Zombie popped in pretty early. Vinny's here. He's burnt out. I know he has been on jury duty. He popped into my Discord to hang out, and he has been kind of getting his butt kicked this week. And Scepter is in chat. Thank you all for popping in, hanging out, dropping a like. We have kind of a different show for you tonight. Oh, there's Casey popping in. Evening, Casey. What we thought we would kind of go into tonight in lieu of our original topic, which was going to be kind of piggybacking off the video that I dropped on Friday that was discussing the evolution of fighting games over the year, where certain techniques came in, where stage transitions came in, stage changes, character archetypes, and all that stuff came into play. Instead of doing something to kind of follow up on our favorite mechanics or favorite changes and evolutions through the history of that, we're going totally left field because we lost a panel member for tonight. So I do want to mention it, though, if you guys haven't caught that one. A lot of effort went into that one. I don't feel pressured to watch it, but if you do watch it, I hope you.
I disagree. Can I interrupt?
Go right ahead.
I disagree. There should be some pressure on you guys. You should check it out. It's a very good video. It is, Nick, I tell you, you did a great job. It's extremely thorough. One of the reasons why we're not covering fighting games is mainly because he's stuck with me, who doesn't really do a lot of fighting games. Now, granted, I am a karate master. I've won many, many bouts. I don't know a single bar fight that I've ever lost. But when I play video games,
were you conscious for the bar fights, or did you just happen to fall asleep and everybody was done by the time you woke up?
Yeah. Typically, it's just a drug-induced coma that I'm in. That I just where I pretend I'm a winner. Really, I'm just slumped over in an alley in my own piss. But for this evening, we're going to pretend I'm a karate champion.
That's fair.
Go check out the video. Yeah, I think it's fair. So we had to change the topic, but you guys should check it out. It's really, dude, you did an amazing job.
I'm glad you really enjoyed it. It took a long time to put that together because I went into it thinking somebody had to have already done this, right? Mm-hmm. And I can kind of look at that, and then that'll give me some framework to kind of base this off of, and then I can start cross-checking details and kind of play it from there, right? To make sure that what they're saying is accurate versus what I'm finding, because I find even if I go to multiple sources, sometimes they'll have different ones or they'll all come up with the same thing, and then I find something totally different.
Yeah.
And then I'll cross-check it by date, and then I realize I found something earlier than what they found, and I'll end up going with that instead, because that's what I found out of my own research. And this one, I didn't find any backbone. Like, nobody had really done this framework. And I'm like, oh, crap. This is going to take a while. And so there were a lot of rewrites as I went through it, because I would be watching the footage, and then I would realize something happened where I'd given credit for it later down the road. Mm-hmm. And I found it as I was watching the footage, and I'm like, oh, crap. It's a pain in the butt.
And do you have an
hey, Cameron, good to see you.
Do you enjoy fighting games? Like, was this a passion project for
you? I do. I actually do really enjoy playing them. I'm absolutely terrible at them, and I'm rubbish online or against anybody else 9 times out of 10. Mm-hmm. I just really like kind of going in, learning the character, seeing what combos you can do, see what characters I like. I often like doing the survival mode and the story mode in a lot of these, particularly if it's a good story mode. Tekken has a really good kind of survival / arcade style mode, which is really good. Hey Jesse, how you doing, man? Jim. And realistically, I just kind of enjoy that part of it, right? Now, if I can find somebody that neither one of us is all that good about, and we can kind of learn together, like I really started getting into Smash with a buddy of mine at one point because he was at a better skill level than I was, but I was able to kind of get up to speed a little bit because Smash is significantly easier to learn the basics of than most fighting games.
Yeah.
So, and his skill level had decreased to where it was going to be closer because he wasn't playing it as regularly. And at one point, we were planning on just picking a couple of regular characters and getting into that. And then that plan kind of fell apart for a little bit. But the idea originally with that was to get drunk and play fighting games badly on Friday night.
That was and hopefully get drunk enough that you start fighting in the backyard with like imaginary Hadoukens.
I mean,
and your wife just
end the night out on a bang. Honestly, I mean, why not?
You're both just Hadouking, and she's just writing a divorce papers.
Hadouken!
What have I done?
It's more like projectile vomiting.
Even better.
Goes to my favorite part. Honestly, sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes a script will just kind of like fly together on its own, and sometimes it's a huge struggle. A lot of times, like Wednesday's video was way easier to write than I thought it was going to be, but it was a nightmare to edit because it's on a padlock basically, and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with the padlock for? Oh God, I did like 6 minutes and 40 seconds on this. God help me, I have to fill this time with something.
Well, Lord knows I hear you on script writing because I'll do something like, this will be fun. There's a nice space battle. And I'm like, that sounds fun. And then I have to go make
it. You have to make it.
Effing 8 months. And then I hate myself for writing it. Why couldn't I just write like, they're in a white room or it's a green room?
Yep. And Mike is out tonight. He got called for work. He's on call. And they had a major kind of like catastrophe at work. So he's out for that. So we made like some pretty quick changes. Dude, that last video took me months. So, and it took me 3 weeks of hardcore editing. So it was not easy. That one especially was very, very difficult. There's no way I expect to get enough views to even come close to the amount of time I dumped into that video. That was a video I did because I wanted it on the channel.
Well, it was a great video though.
Flat out. I wanted it on the channel. I like that series, kind of like I like the game mechanic series, and I wanted it on the channel because it's something I consider unique to this channel. And that's the kind of stuff that I want more of on the channel.
What I want is, I'm sorry, continue.
Go.
No, I'm derailing. Continue.
Okay. The other thing I would like to get is people that are more experts on some of these topics, or coders or programmers or artists or whatnot, and get their viewpoints on and get more stuff like that on there. That's kind of what I'm trying to get the Unsung Heroes thing out, because I'm hoping as some of those get out, I can eventually talk to some people and get their viewpoints and have them in the video talking about their experiences and the processes they go through when they're doing things, and kind of highlight their contribution to what's essentially, I think we'd all agree on, anybody that's on this channel, an art form, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And I just think that would be a cool direction and a unique direction for the channel to have. So
you know what
please.
I was going to say, I'd love to see, I don't know if you'd ever be able to make this happen, if you had a fighting game champion of sorts, right? Let's say, just for the sake of examples, a Street Fighter 6 or whatever, they're a champion of that. And if you could ever get one of the designers of the game, because I would love to have see that conversation of someone who's mastered the controls of the person who made the game. You know, I mean, obviously Street Fighter is a hard game.
No, honestly, I think that's a really cool idea, because they have that kind of dialogue between them and the developers, but most people never see it. Right?
Yeah,
you always get people who are like, they're going to EVO, or they're going to these tournaments, and they're going in all these places, and they can do certain things with the mechanics that the developers can't do and the normal person can't do. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times the game will get rebalanced around those things, which I have a love-hate relationship with. It's good for the professional scene, but 90% of the sales are not to the professional scene. So you're tamping down some of the crazy fun to make it competitive in the professional scene. And how do you balance that? Right.
Yep. Right.
That would be something I would love to have both the developer and the pro on there to go, look, I'm never going to be a pro. There's no way I'm going to be able to pull this off. I don't have the time to put in the practice. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't allocate it here just because I don't see myself getting to the level you're at. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you want it this way because this is how you make your living. But coming from my standpoint, I don't find that as fun as the way it is now. How do you, the developer, take his stance and my stance and come with something that tries to satisfy both camps?
Right.
Right. Or can you? And if not, which way do you lean?
Right? Well, that's the stuff. If you can ever get that, because like that's the stuff I love. I love the nitty gritty of it all. You know, I like conversations in games and stuff like that. That's really a deep dive of everything instead of surface level. Like my favorite game is this. You know.
Yeah. No, I would probably spend weeks trying to set up questions for that kind of interview. If I can lay that out, it would be great. The developers are often competent in the games that they make, and oftentimes they'll have somebody. There's one person who works on the Mortal Kombat team that will do a lot of their showcases for their characters. Like if you watched any of their previews for any of the new characters that came out on that game, they would have one person who works on their team that used to be a professional fighting game expert. That's how he/she, trans. I'm not sure which pronoun to use. I think he goes by she. Will go in and just set up all these layouts and reset things and do all this thing and just really run the character through their paces and show you what the potential is in various different builds and various different layouts that they had, and can actually contribute some input to the team on how that character is working. And those are great to watch. Like if you have any interest in fighters at all, those are super interesting to watch. From that standpoint, like if you didn't even understand like a fourth of what they're talking about, because fighting games have their own language, right? And even a lot of it, I'll sit there and go, I have no idea what you're talking about. Google. I have no idea what you're talking about. Carla, good to see you. So we're gonna go.
By the way, you if I just I don't know who you paused on me, so I'm not sure. Well, you just started screaming Google when you came back, so either I may have glitched out or you glitched out. I'm not sure.
I have no idea. It could have been either one of us.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm sure the audience will be like, "Oh no, it was him." What's up, board? So our topic tonight, since we radically changed directions, and Mike may pop in for a little bit. He said he might be able to pop in for a few minutes.
Look, let me just tell you, by the way, this work issue that he had, his Game Pass subscription ran out. He doesn't have the cash. He's scraping. He asked me, which was, I'm like, dude, I'm not lending you money for
I wouldn't give any money.
Jeez, Mike, this is pathetic. Come on
now. So our topic tonight is basically game mechanics that tend to drive you a little bit crazy or don't really necessarily make sense in the context of the game that they're put in, right? And then we can go off the rails on this a little bit because we always do, because it's RetroRoots and that's what we do.
Yep.
So there's a few I know that immediately come to mind for me that I'll just kind of throw out there in a rapid succession, and then we could talk about those or move on to different ones.
I've got a couple too. It'd be interesting to see if we overlap.
So there's three in particular that will often drive me crazy. You'll like, let's take Gotham Knights as an example, because it does a couple of these at the same time. It both feels a little grindy, and there's a crafting system in it. And both of these kind of don't necessarily always fit in a game, but they always get shoehorned into a game because it bulks up the time that you spend in it, right?
And real quick, let me what's interesting about Gotham Knights, there's a rumor going around, especially with the UI, which is kind of what some have looked at as far as validating this rumor, was that it was going to be a mobile game. And that's why you're seeing some crafty things, some grindy things like that. So that's just something I thought I would throw in there for a second.
Right. And Jim also mentioned like forced stealth mechanics. That becomes a thing too.
That's on my list.
The other one is timers. I know you had specifically mentioned timers.
I hate timers.
And sometimes those fit, sometimes they don't. It depends on what's happening. Like if there's a bomb set up and you have to escape or something like that, I'm okay with a timer. If there's a race and there's a timer, I'm okay with that. But having like an arbitrary timer on a level, not so much.
I've got lots to say when we get to timers.
Go ahead. So those are just a few that we had to field there. That's just to start. Well, I'll pull up more as chat comes on.
I've got a couple too.
But go right ahead. Bring them up.
Okay, so I agree. Timers, yes. Stealth, I agree when it's, as you said, when it is like totally uncalled for. Obviously, if it's Assassin's Creed, I understand why it's stealth. Like you're an assassin. Got it.
Right.
So quick time events, I'm going to throw in there. I know people hate those. Escort missions, especially when they don't work.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't think about escort missions.
And also underwater levels. We've got to talk about water levels.
Some of those work, some of those don't.
When?
Honestly, the original Super Mario Brothers underwater levels I thought were fine. Because there's no air requirement or anything like that. You're just trying to make it through the level in the time limit, right?
And the controls are good.
But there's no like air pockets you have to get like Sonic and stuff like that, right?
Right. Oh God, yeah.
Here comes Mike.
Hey, look who showed.
We radically kind of changed topics tonight.
You're muted,
so
Mike.
We're talking about game mechanics that are either controversial or don't necessarily work all the time or don't work in the context of the game they're put in. So on the plate at the moment, we have underwater levels, we have forced stealth mechanics, we have timers, we have crafting, we have grinding, and
escort missions.
Looting.
Escort missions.
Is another one. How about looting?
Oh, sure.
Looting, if you have to pick up every item individually, I can totally see that. Yeah.
Yes.
Atomic Heart, my understanding, does a good job of auto grabbing. If you like hold the button to loot, you can just sweep and grab stuff, which is a great adjustment to that kind of mechanic. I feel like weight limits.
Oh,
that's another one. I hate weight limits.
Well, yeah, like weight limits, inventory limits, any of that.
Inventory,
stuff.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of that right now with Wo Long.
So, Dread.
How you doing, Dread?
Oh, Wo Long is a fantastic game, but good grief, having to figure out that I have to wear a bandana instead of a helmet because it's 20 pounds for the helmet, and then I can't parry. It's a load of nonsense.
Lord, they put that in there.
Who wants to do math in their games?
It's on Game Pass.
That's a problem in the Souls games too. You have that weight requirement, so you have like slow rolling characters and fast rolling characters, and most people will strip off as much gear as they can so they can move quicker.
Yes. That is a horrible
so
mechanic.
There's a lot of those as well.
And I think that's
Hydolide. That's the first time I ever ran into Super Hydolide. Super Hydolide was a nightmare that way.
I think a really good segue, by the way, maybe to discuss at some point today, because it's actually a good segue. Like, for instance, in Death Stranding, it's all about weight limits, how you distribute the weight. But if you were to go into an easy mode on Death Stranding, it gets rid of all those kind of mechanics. So maybe there's also a discussion in here somewhere about whether or not playing the game on easy mode is a good idea or not. Should developers be doing that? Does it break the game?
Boy, I'll tell you what, that's a huge.
I kind of want to do an entire night on that, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think it's a big
discussion that we could have not only the three of us on, but we could maybe get, because I know Retro Complex is a big proponent for not necessarily having that. Sure. So maybe trying to get him on that discussion would be interesting as well.
But he's a good guy. Like, he's a reasonable guy. Yeah, he's a good
really
guy to have a conversation with. Yeah.
And so he'll listen to the point on it and hear your point out, who may not agree with it. But there's a lot of games that he plays that he'll just pound his head against a boss for 5 hours. And that's totally normal and fun for him. I have other things I need to do with a work shift, essentially, than to beat my head against one boss, right?
Yeah, no, he's good because he's a reasonable guy when you disagree with me. As Mike knows, I send death threats. So I've sent
It's
death
true.
threats.
Yes.
Hey,
It's
Stacey,
awkward.
good to see you, by the way.
And recorded
Thanks for
phone
popping
calls.
in.
Hey, Stacy. What did you say, Mike?
And recorded phone calls.
Correct. Well, that's your
That's
own damn
right.
fault, man.
Jim, I am overburdened. God, everyone
Oh
hates
my God.
that.
And by the
It's
way,
awful.
I do apologize, A, for being late, and 2, I have a 12 o'clock midnight hard
I was
stop.
about to say, I did not expect to see you tonight because
I didn't
one, you
either.
had that hard stop, and 2, you were on that call. So I didn't expect to see you at all.
And I'm going to be up for a while, but I have a 12 o'clock call I've got to get back on. So I'll be on as long as I can. Unless of course my leadership decides to pull in a call before that, and then I'll just mute.
That's
and
fair,
roll.
man.
Or unless your leadership is a fan of the show and they're like, dude, just keep talking. Don't worry
Just
about
keep
it.
going. Just keep going.
So yeah. What I'll tell them is, dude, I'm on a podcast right now. Can you leave me alone?
Dude,
And
listen,
I'm sure
bro, I'm
that's
trying to
gonna
grow
go
my
over
brand.
This is what they call
well.
Yes, and that is what they consider a resume updating event.
Yeah, we call that
corporate
we call
America.
that at our office we call that an RPE, resume producing event.
Yeah, resume producing event, right?
I call it a hot steaming pile of BS.
Yes,
So Jim also mentioned survival mechanics.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes those work. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do feel arbitrary, and
well,
don't
that gets
really
into that
feel the game.
That gets into that interesting thing is that if you love survival games, you want that mechanic. So
But I would say survival works well with crafting, and those two things kind of go hand in hand. There's a lot of really good survival crafting games that's the whole focus of the game is just those two mechanics.
Right.
And you're crafting to make it easier for you to survive or easier to do this or easier to do that. And those fit perfectly in the context of those.
Exactly.
But if you throw it into something like, say, an action game where you have survival elements where you need to like make sure they eat on a regular basis or you get a disability or something like that, that doesn't necessarily fit the flow of my fast-paced action game I'm trying to play.
Well, I'll give you a good example. Like, so even in the Harry Potter game, like, you know how like there's all this magic and you're riding dragons and that you can actually like fit an entire castle inside your handbag?
Hey, good talk. Good to see you, man.
But then somehow it tells you have inventory space limits. I'm like, dude, I just had a whole world in my handbag, and now you're telling me that I have too many socks?
You're telling me this one sock has overburdened me, or won't fit in my inventory space, but I just had a horse in my inventory.
Exactly.
I'm confused.
Yeah, I'm very confused.
That's
I
more
can
of
walk,
an
and I
MMO
can
problem than other things.
Yes,
you know?
I can walk, I can run, I can do everything but parry.
Yeah.
Because I have a helmet on instead of the bandana. Because the helmet is
that doesn't make any sense to me. That one's very confusing. So we should probably take these kind of one at a time. I haven't made like a list, but I'm sure somebody will remind us.
And the audience too.
Just kind of go around and just kind of talk about these and pull up various different things for the audience. For anybody that's just popping in, we're talking about mechanics that don't necessarily fit in the vein of a particular game, or ones that just tend to drive us crazy, either because they put them in too much or they shoehorn them in.
Or if they're timers, how they should be banned.
Or they should just be banned entirely just because we hate them.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and go with timers, because you seem very, very, very keen on timers.
Yes.
Panda, go.
Okay. Let me give you an example of why timers are stupid. Obviously, if you're playing a racing game or something like that, I absolutely understand that. But here's specifically where timers are horrible. When you have to do a task that you're figuring out, right? It's almost like a puzzle task, and you're under the gun. There's going to be a point where you finally go, aha, I get how this puzzle works. And you've got it. But now you understand it. Now it's just doing it 40, 50 times in a row until you can actually just do it fast enough. Like you understood, you got the solve, but now you're burdened by having to do the task. Yeah, well.
I would have loved to have seen that eye roll with him on camera, but
Well, his time is long past. You're out of here, brother. This is a comfy chair. You know what? If you want, I can be Matthews on here too and just say nothing for an hour and a half.
Rob, the link is still in the Discord.
No.
Come on in.
The audience will boot me off any second and just put him on. Damn it.
Now we'll just replace you with Man Machine.
Oh,
With
yeah,
just
well,
a track of it
well,
going,
you know.
I'm hilarious.
I should have ran out and put that shirt on. I have that exact same shirt, the Nintendo 64 shirt.
Oh, nice. Yeah. We all
Yes.
shop at Target.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yes.
So no, I totally understand with just the random arbitrary timers that they don't really make a lot of sense. In older games, they weren't so bad, right? Like, I don't mind them. Hey, Eugene, I don't mind them so much in something like Ninja Gaiden because if I'm not running that at a speed that just seems unsafe to play the game, any game, then I'm not playing the game the way the game was designed, and the timer is a non-issue because if you're playing the game in a safe manner where you're going to run into problems with the timer, you've already failed. Like, you can't play the game at that speed. It's not feasible.
Okay, so may I make an argument to that? Because so then imagine you played the game and you get to the very end, but you just did everything, you did every platform or whatever, you killed every enemy, and then you just miss it by a second. Now you have to do it all over again. I would argue, Nick, if the goal is that you want him running, then just make the mechanic running. That that you're just blitzing through levels. Don't penalize me for I did everything and now I'm a second off and now I have to do the whole thing over again. That's punishment. That's not fun. Like there's nothing I'm learning from that. It's just pure punishment and doing something loot.
No, well, I understand that. Ninja Gaiden's different in the fact that if you don't hit the rhythm and cadence of the game, which is very fast, you're going to lose anyway, right? Because things are going to spawn or pop in at weird times, or they're going to be just out of place. And where you would have been able to do a sword strike and kill something before it knocks you off into oblivion and kills you anyway, it's not going to be in the right place and you're going to die. That's just how that game works, right? There's plenty of games like Mario having a timer. I think they just did that just to have a sense of urgency to push the player.
And it's enough time, though. This is not like designs that's a nail biter.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There is.
Now, if you want a bad example of that, the Ninja Turtles and this hits your underwater level complaint too.
They're combined, dude. I know
Ninja Turtles, the original Mutant Ninja Turtles, the underwater stage with the mines.
Freaking sucks.
That one is
putting it politely.
Just nerve-wracking.
Oh, nerve-wracking. No, it sucks. We can say it.
It's very painful.
I actually mailed Konami my own poop. I mailed it to them. I just said, "Here you go." And
there's one game. There's one game where I feel like that mechanic works because it feeds into the storyline, and that is Dead Rising. Dead Rising had a timer. Now, not all of them. Dead Rising 1 and 2 had a timer on it.
I hated that, by the way. I understood it, but I hated it.
But there was a reason for it, and it had to do with the tenor of the game. It wasn't just like, you have to do this just because I'm arbitrarily timing you. You had to do it because the zombie game, you were turning into a zombie. So there was a point to it. They got rid of that in later games.
I'll answer this in a second.
Because people complained. But I thought that was the only game that I could think of where that worked.
Let me just quickly address this very stupid point.
He's not wrong on this. It's still painful, but
let me address the two stupid points that were just made. One from Matthews and one from this little guy over here. So
I could just see my sub count going.
Correct.
By the way, Nick, I don't think I didn't notice you do have a Toe Jam and Earl screen behind you. Good on you.
That's because it plays into one of my hated things, and it's excessive randomization.
Ah, damn it.
So let me give you a good.
There's a reason for that.
Let me give a good example for this. I'm going to make a game where the story is that you only have a foot, so you have to use your foot as the controller. Change the mechanics of your game and the story then, because if you're going to, that's not an excuse to have it a frustratingly stupid level. Most people here's why that level exists in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Because they knew that they were going to rent it and they needed a level that was so hard that you had to keep going back to it over and over and over again. It's just like an arcade. The timer is there to make sure they get more quarters out of you. That's not fun. That's not a real mechanic. It's just a means to back in the day, frustrate you and make the rentals, rent it longer or buy the game, etc. So I don't accept that as a legitimate.
I do see his argument though, and I don't necessarily I see your point as well. It does diminish the
I'm
fun
just kind of
because the
joking
stage is
around, by the way.
already very hard. You could already easily get killed in that stage with no timer and lose all your lives. Like no question, that stage is just hard.
And that reminds. I mean, that is if you're going to do that, the one of those games that to what your mechanic would be, Panda would be the side scrolling sled level in Battletoads, right? That's not timed, but it's hard as crap.
Yes.
There's a good chance you don't get through it on the first run, have to go back and do it several times and then have to know the pattern.
Yeah.
And even when you know the pattern, it's still absolutely impossible. So,
and the game is not about that, just like Ninja Turtles. The game was never about that mechanic. And so suddenly you have no training on this. It's not part of really the game mechanics as a whole. This is just an injected thing into here that now suddenly you just have to know how to do it very quickly. So like that timer, I would have a much easier time if the game was about defusing bombs. If that was the whole goal, I have an easier time accepting timers. That's the mechanic of the overall game. When you insert it like this, I think that's cheap personally.
Right, and that's why I brought up Dead Rising. Because
Gorge actually brings up another thing: is auto-scrolling considered a timer?
Oh,
and depending on it, sometimes there's like something chasing you or whatnot, and I feel like it works there. Some stages just auto-scrolling feels like it's just there to add a sense of urgency. It's not really bringing much to the stage because they're not giving you a reason other than the fact that the stage is just moving.
Yeah, the world is ending on you. Yeah.
If they set it up properly, I think it's totally fine and great. When it's set up poorly, not so much.
That's a good one, yeah.
Castle of Illusion was a great one of that. Water was rising. You were trying to walk. You were trying to go up the castle. That made a lot of sense.
See, I defend the one on Metroid because they're basically going to destroy the whole base. You've got to get the heck out of there. I understand those. I feel like they get a little overused because since they did it in the first one, they feel they have to do it in every Metroid game. Like,
and it's a fair time.
Every Metroid game has one.
It's a fair timer too. Like
and it is, for the most part, it's a pretty generous timer.
Because it's really just a story element that gives you some urgency, but it's also, we know that you just started the game. We're not going to punish you to death.
Yeah. And a lot of people bringing up Majora's Mask. I didn't even start that one because I was not a big fan of having a straight 3 days, particularly in something as sizable as a Zelda game. The Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask was arguably a little bit bigger than Ocarina of Time. And you're putting me on a forced time limit where I can only do certain things to be able to actually complete the game. And it just feels very frustrating that way. Deathloop does that without a timer. And I haven't started it for similar reasons because you have to lay things out to where you can finish things in one single loop in a certain time period to be able to get the right ending. And I find that kind of annoying to an extent. So I haven't necessarily tried that one yet.
Nick,
my opinion of that's going to be.
I think you would agree on me with this. Had Majora's Mask, and I didn't really play it because of the time limit, so forgive me if I'm totally wrong, and maybe this is actually in the game.
I haven't played it for similar reasons, but go right ahead.
So, as from both of our ignorant standpoints of not actually really completing the game, would you be more up to playing the game if it was the theme of the game, the idea that you're jumping through time and past to solve something, but there is no actual timer, that basically, because you have the ability to jump through time, there isn't actually a real timer. Does that make sense? So it's almost like a mystery. I think that'd be fun. Like, I like that.
Yeah, if you made it like I need to, and Ocarina of Time touched on that, but didn't really flex the time thing quite as much. You would go back to certain periods of time, do certain things, move forward, things would change.
Right.
I think they wanted to add the timer because they wanted to lean into that mechanic more and give you like the fate of the world as a thing.
Yes.
On top of that. And that's where they kind of like, I think, kind of tweaked it a little bit to a direction of where it sort of stopped being a little fun.
I agree, but people love that game.
A lot of people love it. It's considered one of the underrated N64 games that people now have gone back and learned to love. And I might, if I sat down and gave it enough time and played enough, there's so many things I want to play that I think I would love more.
Yeah.
That I have a hard time making myself go back and try to invest the time in it.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And again, that plays into your whole difficulty thing. There's certain games I won't touch because the difficulty level's too high, and I don't
Souls
want to
games.
put myself
Yeah.
under that, pushing into a game that's just going to continuously make me more and more angry. But I'm going to be stubborn and I'm going to continue to hammer at it when I could have beaten and enjoyed and loved 12 other games in that time period.
Exactly.
Like, what am I doing to myself where I'm not getting these other experiences that I would enjoy just as much, if not more, to have this one experience that I hate as much as I love, right?
And you could argue too that at least the past retro games, at least they were short. So if you're going to play a brutally hard game, at the very least, it wasn't going to be a 60-hour game. So nowadays, like a Souls game is a 60+ hour game, and it's brutally hard. That's quite an ask for some people. I totally get that.
And a lot of people, like, I had this discussion on Twitter one day, and they're like, and I was complaining about having to grind in that game. They're like, well, you don't have to grind in that game. I'm like, no, if you've mastered the game and you can beat it on something like a Dance Dance Revolution pad, like I'm watching people do, then no, you don't need to grind the game. You've already exceeded the skill level because you've mastered with pinpoint accuracy where you need to move, what you've got to do, how all the bosses work. There's no more challenge on that for you. Of course, you're not grinding. Anybody else that's just coming into it is going to grind souls to increase their level, to up their weapon, to try to give themselves a fighting chance in that game. That game becomes very grindy very quick to try to compensate for the difficulty curve as much as they can.
Right.
Well, and I think that it also, I mean, it boils down, which is something else I don't like about the Souls game. I don't ever feel like I'm learning how to.
Just gonna leave that there for a while. I suck at that stage too, but
you
I
should leave it on a very long time.
I haven't put a lot of time on that one. I'm so far behind on comments. I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay. I don't particularly feel like I learn anything playing a Souls game. I feel like the only way that I can play a Souls game is to simply know when to roll, strike, roll, strike.
Mm-hmm.
And it came in, and that is what I did not like about Dark Souls 3, about Bloodborne games like that. That's what is making me appreciate a game like Wo Long, because that plays more like Ninja Gaiden, which is, yes, there is a lot of parry, slash, but there's other mechanics in there as well that you need to know in order to beat the bosses and even to just get through 4 or 5 guys attacking you at once. And so the Souls game just, I feel like I learned something playing a Ninja Gaiden type game. I don't learn anything playing a Souls game, and then it just gets boring to me.
You will eventually learn things playing a Souls game, but the problem with the Souls game is and the difference between it and maybe something like Wo Long. And I haven't dove too much into Wo Long, but Souls are notorious for like 1-2 hit and you're done. Right?
Yes.
And that doesn't help the learning curve. Right?
Yeah.
Because you only get 1 or 2 shots and then you might spend 30-40 minutes just trying to get back to that boss to try them again. Demon Souls is notoriously bad about that. That's my main Souls experience, right?
Right.
Because like if you get to, like I got to one particularly hard boss and it took me like 30-40 minutes to get there.
And
only
Demon
to
Souls,
lose in like 2 swings, learn nothing because I didn't know where to dodge or what to do.
Right.
This happened 4 times and it took me 40 minutes each time to get back. So I had to do the whole stage all over again.
Yeah.
And there was no checkpoint anywhere closer to the boss to try to attempt this again. That gets fixed in later games, I'm told. The checkpoint system gets a little bit better. So it's not as bad in later games, but in the first one, it's particularly bad. And it's super disheartening to have to go through 40, 50 minutes of pushing your way through the stage again to try to get there.
That's the other.
To try to get a swing at the boss to maybe get a couple more swings in or start to learn the first of his like 5 attacks in phase 1. And you get 3 phases in any of these boss fights. That's just how they work.
My other issue too, is that you die and you have to start almost all the way back at the beginning of the level. And
right.
that's another, so that I'll get that mechanic. that might be my mechanic overall.
Yeah,
But
obligatory self-destruct timers in RE as well.
yep. And Jim
But,
asked the question, have I played Sekiro? I have not. My understanding is Sekiro is closer to Wolong than it is Souls games. And I'll give you another one that is kind of dead in the middle. That I started to like it first because it didn't feel like Souls. And then as you move through it, starts to feel like Souls, was Neo. And I think what I didn't like about Neo was you needed to not only just, it wasn't just learning how to kind of hack and slash a little bit. You had to know the right stance to be against the right enemy with the right weapon. And where it came into Souls type was that same thing. The guy had hit you 3 times, you were dead. And there was nothing you could do about it. And then you started, I'll get to my bad mechanic. You start way the hell back at the beginning of the level. And by that time, there just came a point to where I just gave up. Wolong does not feel like that. So I am interested to see if Sekiro feels more like that than it does Souls.
Sekiro has its own very difficult learning curve. I've been told my entry into Souls games is 2 games in particular, Bloodborne and Sekiro. And Sekiro is reportedly one of the hardest, but the mechanics are smoother in it than they are in some of the others, and there's a lot more focus on parrying and dodging than just roll dodge. And honestly, the rolling mechanic, I think they stole that out of Ninja Gaiden, because I was always doing like leaps and rolls in that game to avoid damage more than parrying and blocking.
Well, I think
I did that constantly in that game.
You may be right. I was doing a lot of jumping around and stuff too. So that is true. I think I probably did more blocking than rolling. And I see the other difference is Sekiro is from Software. Wolong is Tecmo. So they are 2 different, like Sekiro is in the mold of Souls. And I think the other thing too is if you notice the difference between Ninja Gaiden rolling and Souls rolling, it takes like 4 minutes for your guy to roll in Souls.
That depends on your build. That depends on your build in Demon Souls. Like if you actually dig into it, and there's a lot of data on this game. It's ridiculous. It's very easy to get lost. And then we'll move off of Souls and onto some of these other things because we've really gone down the rabbit hole with this one. The lighter your armor, the faster you can roll. So if you're wearing a bunch of heavy plate and you're near your weight limit, you can roll, but it's very, very slow. The less armor you're wearing, the faster you roll, but the downside is if you get touched, you die. Which is kind of how that game works anyway, so I don't know that armor actually has a point. in the grand scheme of things, I don't know how much armor really helps you in those games.
All that happens is you've died.
Well, I mean, you die in like 3 hits instead of 2 with full plate mail. So is the extra hit really helping you learn is the question, right? Or would you rather just dodge that extra hit? So that's kind of one of those things. Yeah, Jedi Fallen is another one of those. We're told that Souls like, but not quite as bad.
Yeah, no, it's not. And no, it's not nearly as bad. And I think the reason because Jedi Fallen has force powers that allow you to see Jedi Fallen, you could do a lot more range attack than you can in a standard Souls game. And I found that there's a lot more using the force, using your lightsabers to bounce back, gunfire and stuff like real that makes a difference. I thoroughly enjoyed Jedi Fallen Order. I am anxiously awaiting Jedi Survivor. I did not get a Souls feel out of that game. I really didn't.
This kind of plays into our weight limit mechanic that we were talking about that kind of drives us crazy. Fat roll is bad. Armor is mostly useless. Play Souls naked. and he's got a point. Because a lot of people that play that game, that get good at that game, they're either playing like a mage that does more of like range damage and they don't wear a lot of armor to begin with, so dodging is easier. Or they play somebody that uses like maybe a big heavy 2-hander that does a big hit, but they wear very light armor or no armor, and they just dodge a lot and then they hit because it takes less stamina when you dodge as well, given the amount of armor you have. So not only do you roll faster, you use less stamina doing it. So you're punished doubly for wearing protective gear, right? So they give you protective gear and they give you a shield going, hey, look at this fancy shield. You should be using the shield. And then they punish you really badly for using those particular mechanics. So they set you up with, and this is kind of another minor gripe, is when a game will set you up for one play style and then turn the play style around on you. Like they use the play style they presented with you as a weapon against you rather than showing you through what they're giving you how they expect you to play the game. You don't necessarily need a tutorial, but if you're showing people play the game this way, play the game this way, but really it's a ruse to get you to play the game badly, I don't feel like that's necessarily a good thing. You know what I mean? And the first Souls game is kind of bad about that because the first thing they do is they give you a shield and start being like, well, use the shield all the time. Like, use the shield. Well, the shield is kind of bad to use all the time. You really won't be rolling and parrying when you can. But you get in this mindset because the first thing you get is a shield that you should be using the shield a lot. That's not how that game is really successful.
No.
There's been multiple videos proving that. And it was kind of a bad way to train the player without tutorials on how to play the game the wrong way. So why would you start the player out that way? See what I'm saying?
To punish you because it hates you.
Well, yeah, there's that. Souls is like very, very, it's kind of like Ghouls and Ghosts. And that could go into like limited jump mechanics too. That can be a problem. Like seriously committed jumps with zero control aren't necessarily good. And Panda is honestly reminding me a lot of Rob right now. He's just he's channeling his inner Rob.
I'll tell you the difference
Waiting
between
for
me.
a spot.
I'll tell you the difference between me and Mr. Matthews. When I break up with a girlfriend, I don't lurk around their house all day.
Oh, God.
It's time to move on, my friend.
So we've talked ad nauseum about difficulty level, arbitrary difficulty level, timers. We've touched a little bit on underwater levels. Do we want to dig into that some more, or do we want to do stealth mechanics? Jim,
can you name a good underwater level? Let's
Mario
just play from
64. Mario 64.
Yeah, but okay.
Yeah,
Sonic, any Sonic. Gotta go fast in an underwater level.
I hate
no way.
I look, Echo the Dolphin.
Okay, but hold up. A water level when you're a fish, or I know a dolphin is not a fish, but I mean when you breathe underwater, when you can hold your breath underwater. I'm not going to get into the aquatic life.
Is fun, except for being
insanely
grindy and no story filler. We'll get to that.
All right, so you're asking
if I play as a scuba diver and I'm underwater, that's fine.
No, then I would say Dire Docks in Mario 64. I thought that was incredibly well done.
But you
water level.
I guess you do you do have to get coins in order to get your oxygen level, I think, in that, right?
No, you just have to get to the you get to the surface. The coins don't give you oxygen.
Clams that open up that have air bubbles too.
Yeah,
and the coins give you oxygen also, if I remember right. So there's plenty
there's
of
a couple ways underwater to get
I was gonna say
I
don't remember the coins giving you
I'm
oxygen,
pretty confident.
I will ask Seth. He is the foremost expert on this game.
Yes. There's a little bit of bias there, but I will accept
we already spent a lot of time on the dam level. We can't go back to the dam level. We already did that.
Seth does not lie. My son does not lie.
Hey, Mazen.
Mazen. Echo was amazing. And man, mind-blowing on the Dreamcast. I tell you, that was a wild 3D game. Sorry.
Which one? I'm sorry. I was laughing at the Barbie comment.
Echo the Dolphin.
Yeah.
Okay, Mazen's saying the coins do refill your health, which functions as oxygen.
All right, I don't remember.
I'm wearing a Nintendo 64 shirt. I mean, you're not.
No,
even though you also have it, but
you know.
I think the reason that the Sonic levels, particularly the 2D Sonic levels, are so offensive as far as underwater levels go, is because the entire game is built around speed,
right?
And then you're stuck underwater. Right. Floating awkwardly, trying to grab air bubbles, and just the sound of you about to die in that game, I'm having like anxiety right now just thinking about it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no.
That was you're not wrong about that. That's a hard game to play like that. And if you didn't find an air bubble the sound of him drowning was
Oh yeah. It's that last gasp is just.
There is nothing worse in the video game than when you, especially the old platformers, when the level starts and then all of a sudden you start to see like water start coming from the top. You're like, oh man, I now have to throw this game out. Oh god, here we go. It's a water level. When they surprise you.
Well, I think we're gonna deviate into the 4 stealth sections too, because there's a lot of games that do this.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of these aren't necessarily the mechanics themselves. To be put a fair point in this, guys. Like if you design a game around being underwater, like Subnautica, then it makes total sense.
Perfectly good. Same with the timer. If it's a game about
timers make sense in context of the game. But when you're doing like one game type, and then all of a sudden, boom! Oh look, by the way, stealth level. If you get found, you fail. But you've had no other opportunities to use stealth till now.
Yep.
Now you have to learn an entirely new mechanic on a stage that may only be one stage that's a stealth mechanic. And there are a lot of games. I think the Spider-Man for the PS4 had like one forced stealth level. That was
I'm trying to remember what level that was.
And
I know it had one, and I know people complained about it.
And you have to, by the way, by the end of this,
I know what it was. Sorry, it was the Miles Morales level.
Donkey Kong Country had some good water levels.
Oh, those are great. And best music of all time. But at some point, we do have to combine the forced stealth with forced escort missions. And when that's done poorly and your escort constantly just walks into the enemy and then you're found, that is...
You're getting like RE4 flashbacks, aren't you?
No, that is, yes. That is a...
See, my flashback to that is... honestly, Earthworm Jim takes the cake on a lot of these because it was kind of like level after level of mechanic design that I didn't like. But one of the worst ones was stage 6, where you had to walk the dog. And if the dog got bit, it would come back and do damage to you. That entire stage, whoever made that stage needs to be fired and blackballed from the industry entirely. Like, an entire stage like that is the worst, dude. I don't even like escort missions in MMOs.
No, escort missions almost never are.
Because they're slow, they're plotting.
Yeah.
If the person gets hit, half the time they die and you fail, you have to restart it again. If you move too far away from them, they run back to a location and they stop. Sometimes they get re-attacked by the enemies that you just killed, and you have no idea what happened. These things are bad. And they just added them into Final Fantasy XIV in the last expansion, and I'm like, oh no. Yeah. If we were clear, we were free. Why? Why did you bring this back? Everybody hates these.
I agree.
It was an entire stage around that. But then Earthworm Jim was an example of a game that had no play style.
Agreed.
No cohesive play style.
Agreed.
Every stage felt like a
agree
different play
It
style.
was a fever dream of ideas thrown into one thing.
It was meant
I
to
like
be
Earthworm
like
Jim.
that. But it was meant to be like that. That's the thing. It was.
And Mazin's laughing because I'm off on Earthworm Jim again.
I know. we just let him go, Mazin. We just let him go.
Bad Teammate AI is another one. That is that's just
too bad you're not on the show, dude.
The only escort missions that I really like are escort missions they're escort missions that are in like flight. Hey, Boogie. Flight and space combat sims. Like escorting ships to.
Those
I
make
like
a little bit more sense, or running protection or something like that until somebody can go to light speed. Because I saw some of those on like X-Wing and the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games. That line of games would use those sometimes. Where
I love those.
It was more of like a defensive escort thing. They would move along until they could hit their hyperspace jump point.
Yeah, they get their jump point.
Yeah,
or in an air combat simulator, you're escorting the bombers to their to their target. I mean, those are the kind of ones that I really like. These ones where, Dr. Bill, let me get you out of this. Let me get you out of this house. And we turn the corner, and Dr. Bill gets shot in the back by the enemy because nobody's looking. Yeah, I don't. Those are.
We've missed one of the most notorious ones, and that's GoldenEye.
Oh yes,
that's bad AI combined with escort.
Yes,
because she would notoriously run in front and get shot constantly.
But like that's the thing. Like, how does that happen? I'm sorry. Well, Mike, continue. I'll ask this question.
I've had these where that happens and then they turn around.
We're going into
then the actual doctor, the actual scientist. I know what stage you're talking about. The actual scientist turns around and starts shooting you himself.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mr. Matthews, but handsome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Nobody. How did you not notice that, Nick? I saw that.
I saw it. I just wasn't saying anything. I was just letting it play.
Basically, what I'm doing.
About it earlier, but we were in the middle of a convencation, so
I know Matthews. I'm forcing him back on right now. Like it's grinding his gears. He's gonna jump on, and still add nothing to the show like always. But he'll be back on. Wink. My question is like when they have these mechanics that we're talking about, like these escort missions that clearly don't work. It was play tested. Why do you think that that's left in? Why do you think that they thought this is a good place to put this in? Let's kill all the momentum here. Like, why do you think they do that?
I feel like they just want to change up the gameplay. It's kind of like having the 4 stealth missions, right? They do it because they feel like the gameplay at that point is getting too monotonous and they need to do something to shake up their core gameplay, right? Mm-hmm. So one way of doing that is an escort quest. I don't know why they still use that, and I don't know why we haven't come up with something better than 4 stealth mission or escort, but those seem to be the most commonly used.
There is a game where it works. I always seem to be able to find a game where it works.
Okay.
Rainbow Six Vegas. Those had, because you were doing exactly that. You were going in, you were infiltrating. It's Rainbow Six. Your whole point was to rescue. The whole point was to rescue people.
I didn't even think about that, but that's probably why you're wearing that shirt.
Nothing is ever by mistake.
It's all calculated. All calculated. Those are the games that it does work on. But it's built into the storyline.
Oh God, yeah, this is terrible as well.
Oh,
this was an awful change. I hated this.
Yes.
I thought this was completely arbitrary and stupid.
And I'll tell you where this even gets worse. Loot progression that are tied to achievements and trophies.
Oh well, that's a whole other topic of evil.
Oh, MMOs do that all the time, having like best in select gear or this, that, and the other tied to an achievement. Yeah, I see that all the time. Gotham Knights actually has that too. Like having like a legendary or something like that, and each slot is an achievement in that game. And that one cuts back to grinding and other things like that are kind of arbitrary in the game, but we kind of haven't hit there yet. So I'll let that.
As far as the escort stuff, I know that, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I just know that Ken Levine, I believe his name is, who did BioShock, and he really wanted to make sure that Elizabeth, if I remember her name right, was a really good teammate of yours. So it's not necessarily an escort, but they made a lot of design changes to make that experience a lot better, where the character was more helping you instead of getting in your way. But what happened from that, and you kind of saw this a lot afterwards, was that these characters, like you see it with Ellie in The Last of Us, Last of Us Part 1, where she was your sidekick, where when you're sneaking around, you'll see them actually just walk around and the enemy is staring at them, but it doesn't count as that you've been seen because they got rid of that little headache. But I always thought that was kind of, immersion breaking when you just have the enemy seeing your teammate walking around in front of you. But at least it got rid of that annoyance of the escort mission where your escort constantly got you in trouble, constantly got you killed, etc. So it was good and bad. And I can tell from the silence that I have said such an incredible point.
I was trying.
No. We're all basking in the glow of how good that point was. So let's soak it in.
Probably not. I wasn't listening to you, actually. I was
I
That's
kind
the
of fell.
proper response.
I kind of fell asleep during that. Sorry.
sorry. What?
Yeah,
No, don't repeat it. It's
I
fine.
deserve that. So let me start over.
I was trying to apply to a couple comments that didn't really fit in the line of questioning that we're doing right now, but I wanted to respond to them. So I was kind of typing and not listening at that point. So that's on me.
You don't have to explain yourself. That is the proper response.
Bad mechanic, Panda changing his nickname.
Yeah.
And Eugene Juice doing the smile and nod, and he'll go away.
Yeah. It doesn't. It just makes me babble more.
He
it
won't.
Just
With
babble
him, it
on
won't.
and on.
It never works. I've
It
tried.
Yeah, everyone has. I've just been on dates where they just, over the course of the half hour, just keep getting further and further away from the table. They just get, and then awkwardly, like 10 feet away, she's by the door. Just keep talking. Very interesting point.
Next thing you
Pay the
know,
bill.
they're bribing the waiter to get your attention so they can dart for the door.
Yeah. I'm not listening to that a-hole.
So another one
that
is
a pterodactyl?
And this
they
fits
always,
in the
they always
Gotham
get me on
Knights,
that
which
one.
goes into that whole achievement progression being tied to certain levels of gear. Is Gotham Knights did this, and this was a radical change for the series because I don't remember. Now, I've played 3 of the 4 main titles. I missed Origins, which I don't think was in the main line.
No, that was
Gotham
off their
Knight.
Montreal
That was kind of
branch.
off.
I missed Gotham Knight,
Still a
but I
good game,
played all the way through Asylum. Loved that game.
Oh, that's a
I
Asylum
played a
was
little
so
bit of
good.
City and need to give that one another chance.
Oh, you have to play City.
Dude, I was so
arguably the best.
frustrated with the collectibles in that one game because I was able to get them all in the first one, and there were just too many in the second one, and it just frustrated me.
Well, that's an OCD. You don't have to actually do that.
I know. It was just kind of a thing that I was enjoying in the first one
Mental
and wanted to
disorder,
continue it
correct.
in the second one and really felt like I couldn't, and it annoyed me and put me in a bad mood.
Sure.
I need to go back to it. And then I've been playing Gotham Knights recently, which is actually quite a fun game, but has a few things that I don't think fit with the flow of how that series has worked up until this point, right? One is you go on nighttime missions where it's kind of open world, but you kind of have a mission. So there's a bunch of different random crimes that you have to resolve, but you also have health packs. And so if you run into there's particular enemies in this game that I still struggle with all the everything else that's going around to dodge enough of their mechanics effectively to not need to waste health packs.
Mhm.
That a lot of times if I try to solve a lot of things in the night as far as normal crimes, which you need to do to get enough of the arbitrary crafting items you need to craft your increased gear so that you can do more damage to these guys that are kind of randomly increasing levels you go through the game, or so that you can complete the next mission with a reasonable amount of time or effort without just sitting and beating on the same guy for 40 minutes. You need to spend some time doing these.
Mm-hmm.
But the other Batman games didn't need that. Everything was
No.
balanced in such a way that the combat kind of flowed really clean. Everything, the dodging was really nice. The counters were great. I feel like the counters aren't so much of a thing, and everything's based around doing a dodge at just the right time so that you can get momentum, so that you do more damage, so you spend less time slogging it out with this one guy that's this random dude that should have died in one hit, right? And if you're not upgrading your gear, that takes even longer, which means you're doing all this even more just so you feel competent going into the next mission. So when you do run into the inevitable boss fight, you're not running into like this Souls level guy where you're chipping away 1 HP at a time, right? By the time you get there. It just doesn't fit with the way the series worked before, and it feels shoehorned in to lengthen the game arbitrarily because it forces you to A, grind, and B, craft.
Well, like I said, the rumors
in the game before.
It was the rumors it was a mobile game. Originally.
Oh, it was supposed to be a mobile game?
That's the rumor.
I've heard that rumor. I'm not
Later, Amused. Thanks for popping in, man.
Good night, Amused.
Because Mike, if you look at it, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's one of those situations where I think that they were, when they first started developing this, I think it was like 18.9 billion years ago, something like that. Don't question my math. But around that time period, like loot and all that stuff, like all that grindy stuff was like in, and then it started to go out. And I think they quickly tried to shift things over, and that's why there's something about Knights that supposedly feels very off, very out of place. That it wasn't because there was a mechanic that was kind of built in that they then removed. If that makes sense.
No,
Okay.
that's totally plausible. Completely.
That would make a
plausible.
lot more sense if it was supposed to be a mobile game. I mean, it works well as a AAA game. The story's fantastic.
Well, it's the owls,
like
right?
a lot of the well, I don't want to go into a lot of enemies, but a lot of their dialogue and the motivations and a lot of the audio logs you're getting as you go around collecting things. There's a lot of time and care and passion and put into those, right? And into portraying the characters as they are. So there's a lot of love and thought put into the game, which is why I keep getting compelled to go back into that world.
Mhm.
Even though it is kind of grindy, I find the characters compelling and kind of relatable. I find hearing a lot of the audio logs from like Bruce and stuff like that. The voice actor they got for him was phenomenal.
Mhm.
Like when he's having an emotional moment, you can tell it just through the audio log, right? You can literally feel it. And there's so much really well done dialogue and interesting kind of story arcs that are there and things that they're trying to, as you're going through doing investigations and stuff like that, which is a high point. And I kind of like how they did the investigations because you'll walk up sometimes, you'll find somebody who's been like killed or whatnot, and you have to solve like this little mini like investigation, right? It's never really very hard. You find 4 or 5 things and you point to the thing that takes you to the next location. Sometimes you'll do it in a mission where there'll be a bunch of stuff laying around. You have to kind of puzzle together like how to open this one thing, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And those are kind of fun, different little puzzle elements that lean more into the detective side.
Mhm.
And I think those fit,
Mhm.
even though they kind of kill the faster pacing of some of the earlier titles, right? Because they're not as smooth as like doing this normal vision and like Asylum with Batman, but you don't expect these guys to be as good a detective as Batman,
You're
right?
Mhm.
So it
Right.
taking them longer to get there makes sense,
Mhm.
right? So canonically, it works, right?
Sure.
So I don't mind that. Another one that Zombie brought up is like
Yeah,
in
that's a good
Energy
point.
Meter also being a timer. I didn't even know that was a thing. That sounds awful.
It does. It sounds like I want to immediately unlive myself. Like that is
That
a
sounds terrible.
yeah.
I've seen a couple games like that where you're just hold on. The mother of that game of that mechanic, Gauntlet.
Oh, that's what that is, Vinny. Okay. Everybody went dead silent. What happened?
Well, Mike was talking, and then you said, "Oh, that's the thing." We were all confused. We're not sure
I'm
if
sorry.
you were.
Like, Vinny had made a comment earlier that Inaba, which I hadn't even heard of, was better than Game Pass, which I think was just meant to bait Mike a little bit.
Good point. Good point.
I don't even know what that is.
I didn't know what it was, and then he put the explanation here is that it's a really cheap game site, like really insanely cheap.
Oh, it's
Kind of
just a
like
place to buy games.
Kind of like the what's that other one? The that always gives like the Steam Pack deals. There's another website that does something like
In
that.
fact,
They
you
bundle a
can
bunch of Steam.
buy.
Humble Bundle. That's what it is.
Yeah, I've seen this. I've seen this site. You can buy games, or you can actually buy Game Pass Ultimate subscription cards. So I mean, it's just a place you can buy games.
Eugene, I call this mechanic BS. That's what I call this mechanic.
And that is what hold on. That's what Mazin said.
Ghosts and Goblins.
Ghosts and Goblins.
Oh, right.
Yes. Mazin
I
said
call
that
the
too.
Mechanic BS.
That's what Mazin said too, right?
I
The
agree.
next comment down.
That is correct, Mazin.
Yes, that is the correct answer.
There's the only way to respond to that.
That I have to say, Born Distracted's icon melts my heart every time, and that's hard because it's stone cold. Like I love that little icon, little puppy.
Oh, the puppy on the cat on top of the dog.
Next time you're.
It's not good to see you, man.
Next time you're raging on Game Pass, I will show you.
So, Mike, Mike, you had a point. You were talking about Gauntlet.
Yeah. So the comment was the energy meter that's also your timer in the Dragon Power game in NES. before that game, the original energy meter that's your timer was Gauntlet. As you played Gauntlet, it didn't matter what you were doing. Your energy went down. It just went down faster when you got hit by something
because of arcade mechanics.
And you needed, and Red Warrior needs food, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that was the genesis of that. I hate that mechanic too.
And that popped up in Gauntlet Legends in the arcade too, because not only did you lose life from taking damage, you just constantly lost life.
Which thankfully in the home console,
when they did the console version, they removed that. Yeah,
so.
Exactly, because that was made for arcades.
I didn't see it, Jim. I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Okay, I missed it as well. I'm trying to keep up with chat and trying to keep up with the conversation, and I'm failing a little.
Sorry, and I'm looking over at my.
So I will take some responsibility for that. Not a lot. I'm going to blame most of it on Mike, obviously.
Yeah, totally agree. Mike's fault.
Yes, completely. I'm the easy target. I'm just checking to see when I'm going to have to, walk my dog's noodles.
My dog noodles.
So Boogie mentioned another bad mechanic or more practice, I guess, is showing items in trailers that are unattainable in the game itself. And you do see this, like even you would even see that in World of Warcraft to an extent, because I want to say on Burning Crusade, they showed a player looking like they had the Demon Hunter blades, but I think that was only ever like a really rare legendary that got patched in the very last patch of that expansion. It didn't exist in the game, and 99.9% of players never obtained it, and it was only class specific at the time to like Rogue. It wouldn't be until like way later where they would make a Demon Hunter class and actually let people wield those more normally. So there's all kinds of things like that where they'll show something in like the production order, this really cool weapon or item, and people buy it kind of based on that, wanting to be able to get that item at some point, and then they can't, like at all.
I think we
kind of like a bait and switch. I don't know if it's a bad mechanic or just
it's a bad marketing, bad
developer's part.
Yeah, I'll tell you a very controversial game mechanic. Let's talk all about quick time events. Yeah. How is Noodles?
That was brought up by a couple people. I know a couple people in chat mentioned quick time events, and you had mentioned them as well
at the top.
And these were really bad for a long time. Jedi, the Force Unleashed, which had you finish every boss with a big quick time event, which looked amazing when you got it right, super frustrating when you didn't, was one of the offenders.
Right, and if you look at that, let's look at that for a second, because I think that plays into like even what I was talking about with timers and stuff like that, especially when it's not the main mechanic. So there you are, you just beat the boss, and now you failed the quick time event, and so therefore you now have to do the whole thing over again. The quick time event is not the thing you've been learning throughout the game. It's not the thing that you've been building. It's not the thing that you've been, gaining experience with. Suddenly it's just how well do you know your controller? Like that to me is a very bad mechanic. Whereas Parappa the Rapper totally works. That's fine. That's all about knowing the controller and hitting, in time with the beat. So I think a lot of times all the things we're talking about today is when it really feels shoot in, or when it feels unfair, or if it seems like it's designed to frustrate, or make you start over. Like that's when these mechanics are really bad, in my opinion. IMO.
And I'll give you the game that I think it works in.
You're going to say Hi-Fi Rush, aren't you?
Well, I agree too, Mike.
No, because I don't think, because Hi-Fi Rush is not a QTE game. The game I was going to go with.
It is to an extent. There are parts of it that definitely are.
It's
fight.
You don't have to, but you don't have to do it that way. You just get more points by doing it.
There are bounce mechanics that you have to do.
There are bounce mechanics.
There are boxes where you have to do it in.
But it's not.
There are entire button presses that have multiple.
Guys, promise me.
You have to do it in.
But it is
promise me when you guys fight in the backyard that you do it by pressing X and circle at the right time. That's what
I'm just gonna randomly press buttons so I windmill constantly. that's how I'm gonna play.
All I do is just Hadouken all day long.
I'm gonna button spam.
No, you'll both lose. This is quick time event. It's like you have to do it right at the right time. and then O, right? Or A and B and C,
Right.
like
Zombie was
Xbox
talking
player.
about the mechanic where you get in Gauntlet where you could like actually break the food.
Yes, you could.
And
shoot
he's
the
like,
food.
he's like, exactly, Red Warrior, shut the food. I'll kill you.
The game that it seems to work really well in, that a lot of people hated when it was first announced, was Rise, Son of Rome.
Mm-hmm.
I never got around to that one. It looked interesting, but I never got to it.
It's
people really beat it up for that.
They did, but but when you played it, really is a game that I enjoyed, and it held up well, and it happened to use Kinect too, which didn't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I think QTE, I think if you don't do this, you're going to die, right? Like or you're going to take damage. Do you guys remember Dynamite Deca, or it was Dynamite Deca in the arcade? It was Die Hard Arcade on the Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those Sega games.
I think that was on the PlayStation as well, but I don't think I ever
really. Eventually,
it was eventually reported. It was a beat 'em up, right? 3D beat 'em up, and then all of a sudden,
I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't see that. What did you just do? I'm sorry.
You're just running. Yeah,
Okay,
you're fighting.
There we go.
I have to do the video. I have to do the video game fight moves.
Yeah. Woo, it's getting hot in here. Woo.
Hey, don't make me. All right. So, hey,
he's gonna try to rip that shirt, and it's not gonna work. It's gonna be
I don't want to rip. I don't want to
fall over his chair.
I do not want to rip this shirt because I need it for the gym. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're running down a hallway, and you have to hit the right button to slide.
I remember those. So you can either tackle or punch or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you missed, you got your ass kicked.
Yeah.
So I mean, those I don't particularly like, because again, those come out of nowhere, and they do nothing to the game.
Out of nowhere, it goes to the comment they got left below, which is where I really started disliking 343.
Just guarantee it's your only friend watching who gets to play the cool fight scene.
Yeah.
Right,
she watched me go through legendary mode on Halo 4 with friends. And not only were some of the bosses reused over and over and over.
Halo had Q-Tech?
And over again. Come up with something new. To the point to where I was tired of killing them. We got to the last boss fight. Yeah! We finally made it. We're going to get this epic fight. Why do I not have any control? Why am I watching my buddy for 25 minutes fail a QTE sequence?
I'm sorry, is this his Halo Infinite?
The boss fight!
4.
Oh, 4, okay.
The final fight.
That was the boss fight. That was the whole fight.
That was the whole... Nope. And here's what's funny. Seth and Jacob have played through Halo 4 together co-op. It was a picture I put on Twitter of them playing split screen co-op. They got to that point, and Seth said the exact same thing. Wait, what happened? Why can't I? And Jacob had to take the whole fight, and Seth just had to sit there and watch. That was 343 took a lot of crap for that.
That was terrible.
And rightly so. That was
their first entry into the series, and it was a terrible entry. Because the rest of the game had been okay.
I think the rest of the game
was repetitive because too many of the bosses were reused.
Well, yes, but at the end of the day, it was a solid Halo game to that point. Now, if you played it single player and you weren't playing it co-op, you didn't even know. When I first played through Halo 4, I played single player, so I didn't. It didn't.
Yeah, I don't remember that. Yeah,
dude, if you had given me I still would have bitched about it. Giving me a QTE as a end boss is garbage.
At the very well, it was at the very, very end of it. You still had to knock him down first.
We barely even looked at him. We walked in, all of a sudden it's a QTE. Like, we barely even noticed he existed.
Right, but you had to knock him down from outside first before you got close to him. There were those areas.
That was the stage. That wasn't a boss fight. That was just the stage.
But he was part of that stage, is what I'm saying. But the whole last part of that fight, you're absolutely right, was a bizarre design choice.
Yeah. And simpler mechanics like friendly fire or shared continues, those are also terrible ideas.
Oh yeah.
Friendly fire should always be able to be turned off. If you want it on for laps, that's fine. Being able to turn it off, I think, should always be mandatory in a game. Like, I understand earlier games, they just didn't do that. Shared continues.
I like those both as
Those are very
options.
frustrating.
I think those are options for people who love challenges and stuff like that. Fine, but as playing a game as that's the only option, I think is crap.
Yeah, limited continues in general, we could argue, is a bad mechanic that only really got put in to arbitrarily increase the difficulty in games, and you didn't need it to make a game difficult. They just did it just to be mean. Or in the case of Earthworm Jim, they would hide it in bonus stages where you had to grab things in order to earn them, which became just kind of frustrating in and of itself in a game that was already hard enough.
Right.
That felt like you should have just been able to continue anyway. Or when they take them away, like I think I was playing Rambo 3 on the Genesis at one point, and I managed to just continue my way through to get through most of the stages without needing to use save states or anything like that. And then I got to the last stage, and then you couldn't continue anymore. So either I ran through this arbitrary number of continues, which it never told me that I had a limit on, or it just decided on the last stage, if you don't complete that stage with no continues, it's game over.
Right.
And I'm like, changing a mechanic like that, if that's how that works, is just bad.
Yeah.
Right. It's just you get it where somebody kind of relies on something to learn a stage, and then you take it away like that. That's just bad game design.
I agree. I understand making a game where you have limited continues because the whole idea of the game is that difficult, overcoming that difficult. Totally get it.
Right.
But what you just said is BS.
Right.
Yeah.
And being able to steal lives from another player, that's a thing in common games too. You'll see that in Super Mario Brothers a lot.
Well, I had something similar where I would just pull their controller out constantly and then just hey, Big Block.
Games where the vehicle's biggest threat is running out of fuel. Honestly, I find sometimes vehicles in some of the games are almost more dangerous than anything else in the game to the player.
Yeah.
Like Adventure Island, like being on the skateboard allows you to get an extra hit, but it's so hard to control the skateboard half the time. You're almost better off just not being able to make an extra hit.
Right.
And it makes the game more playable because you have more control. You're not forced to go on a certain momentum. I find in a lot of GTA games, I do better almost on foot than I do in a car because I find the car is so hard to drive in GTA in a lot of cases that I end up killing myself on the way to the mission.
That's the fun of it, though.
Than I do actually accomplishing the objective. Now, if the objective is to take the car and to get the car somewhere and not have it explode, then that makes total sense. It's just part of that particular mission. But if you're using it as part of your transport to try to escape or whatnot, it can almost become as much of a hindrance. So depending on how you've designed your vehicles and how playable they are, they can almost, like, I know everybody when they first started playing the original Halo, the Warthog was like the most uncontrollable, awful thing on the planet. It was constantly flipping, flying all over the place.
Yeah,
it seemed completely uncontrollable until you got used to its weird mechanics.
Because you couldn't. It was what you thought was the way to control the Warthog was not. You basically pointed the camera where you wanted to go and press forward. And and once you figured that out, you could do all kinds.
You could do weird, crazy stuff with it. Yeah, but you almost use the right stick like a kind of handbrake, almost.
Yes.
To turn while you were just going at full throttle, and you had to realize that that's what you were doing, and it took forever to get used to.
And I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 where the last part of the game was you and a Warthog trying to. Was that Combat Evolved where you were driving across the?
Yeah, maybe you had to escape out of the whole thing. as it was starting to explode and
crumble
flood
out?
everywhere.
I don't know why I thought that was.
I think that
2.
was 1, dude.
You're talking about the last level where you're in the warthog escaping?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's 1. That's
Yeah.
That 1.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
and
wonder
that's
if
if you didn't get good at the Warthog before then, that's another kind of thing. Like, you didn't necessarily have to get good at the Warthog, right? To talk about shoehorning mechanics that weren't really necessary for the remainder of the game. Don't get me wrong, learning the Warthog early in the game was super useful. You probably wanted to do it, but you didn't have to.
Mhm.
It was not necessary. And in some cases, a huge hindrance. But to put the last stage to where you're in it, and you have to now know how to masterfully drive this
Yeah,
thing.
there it is. So it's the mall level in the.
It's super bad. It was there. I know a lot of people called BS on Bungie for that one too, because that not only was it easy to get lost or to hit something accidentally or have something explode and flip the thing and cause you problems, because it was all the flood, which brings into the worst mechanic of a Halo game from Zombie, the flood. Which I don't necessarily disagree with that, because it took a tactical shooter and made it a zombie horde shooter for a long period of that game.
And I will say, this is kind of, I want to just quickly add, because this is sort of also on a timer mechanic thing. I understand when people say it's the idea of building stress, and story-wise, you are trying to escape something, right? But there's a reason why in movies, when they say we only have 5 minutes to leave, and then really, if you were to actually time it, it's 72 hours that they've been on screen doing this. Like, you can build tension
it's like
without
watching
an
24.
actual.
It's way more than 24.
Yeah, yeah. You can build tension without necessarily putting a timer mechanic on it. Because listen, the problem with that mechanic is you're going to keep failing, right? So you've already broken the illusion, the immersion of escaping. You've died 42 times, and now suddenly you're Groundhog Daying, where you can keep coming back to life and repeating the same thing. So you've already broken that illusion. It better for me, if you're trying to build a cinematic ending, you can have that alarm going off. You can have that sense of urgency that you need to get out, but you don't have to have this second by second timer where if you didn't get there in time, now you lose and you have to keep playing. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's ways to still have that tension without punishing the player, especially in Halo, where the Warthog was not the game. Like, that was not.
Let me pose a modification to like the timer mechanic, right?
Sure.
Say you do have a timer mechanic, and say it gives you an arbitrary, like, say 3 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's 3 minutes to get from like this section to this section.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have like a different timer reset that maybe you say it's 2 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes, right? From section to section, right? Instead
I think
of just
Metroid
one
did it
big
perfect.
timer.
Metroid did it
start
perfect
at that section again at that part of the timer, and you still have that kind of tension, but you're still trying to figure your way through it. It allows them to do that tension, but makes it a little less frustrating, maybe.
Sure, it's just as a designer, you have to go, well, what is it that I want the player to experience right now? If you're saying tension, okay, then you have to give a tangible tension that you're not constantly resetting. You've broken the immersion if you keep dying at something, because now you're just looking at it. You're no longer in the story. You're just like, F it. I just need to get to this part. Damn it, I died again. Damn it, I died again. So you've broken that. Give a reasonable time where you can enjoy yourself, but feel the need to get through this thing as quick as you possibly can. And then it's not like all those levels every time, like even in Halo, it was designed to frustrate you. You could see that it was designed to frustrate you. And that's just, I don't understand the logic behind that, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like, there's ways of doing this. Like Metroid, as I keep saying, what a perfect way of doing it. It's a reasonable time where you do feel like you need to get out of there, but really you've got some time to spare. It's fair. It's
right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a couple of others that have been brought in. Boogie brought on 90s games, where Disney games adding things like spikes and fillers that are insta kills to basically, lengthen the game, stuff
that's
like that.
That rental.
Basically just
issue.
That rental mentality, right?
Yeah, I agree.
There's that kind of thing. And then Mazen mentioned the breaking weapons in Breath of the Wild.
That's a good one.
Which is a pet peeve of mine. And I don't mind some of them breaking. Like if you're picking up like a limb off of a tree and that breaks, I get that, right? But I felt like the tree limb had about as much durability as my
long sword,
or my knight sword. And that didn't make any sense to me. That's
or
where,
a lockpick. Why does a lockpick break? When you
well,
use
and
it?
then there were some items that you could recraft if you could find the right item, like the ceremonial spear and the light scale spear. You could recraft, but you had to find a particular spear, and I could never find a replacement spear. I had diamonds for days that he needed, but I couldn't find the one weapon that he needed to be able to craft me another one of these things that was going to break in like 30 seconds.
Right.
I'm
right.
like, this makes no sense, right?
I've heard the argument, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think Halo is brought up, and I've played them, but I don't remember them too much. The argument I've heard on weapons like that break and stuff is that the designer wanted you to constantly be moving forward and adapting to the environment. Like Halo, if I remember right, is not about collecting your favorite gun and then bringing that with you throughout the whole game. It's about, I've run out of ammo, I pick up another gun. Is that right, Mike?
Right.
Halo is kind of famous for that, right?
Yes.
And that's another reason for like
not,
the 2-weapon limitation as well.
Right. Although, so if you do it correctly, you can take an entire weapon through a game, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to run into enemies because you're picking up those guns you're either picking up those guns that the aliens are using, or you're finding gun placements. What Halo teaches you to do is conserve, not just be John Rambo running through.
Okay.
You have to be judicious about your ammo. So,
well, there's different ways of doing that same thing too, because and I'll take like Call of Duty and other games like that. Like aiming tightens in your sights so that your grouping is better. The more you shoot, the more they spread. The less accurate your shooting is, the more you're just wasting ammo that you don't need to waste. It's a way of trying to teach the player to fire in tight bursts, right? And they could have done it more that way too, and they kind of do in a sense, because there's
some of the weapons
in a game where like I can carry the human weapons around most of the time and not drop them for the most part, because there's always human ammo laying around. There's times where you're in some of the alien ships, and if you're not comfortable with the needler, you're probably going to be grabbing a couple of different alien weapons, because for some reason when you use them, they have limited ammo charge, but when the enemy uses them, they don't, for whatever reason.
They have unlimited.
They have unlimited ammo. It's very confusing.
Yes.
So you're always wondering how they reload some of these weapons, right? So there's kind of stuff like that, right? And I guess that kind of feeds into the weapon durability a little bit, because it's kind of like a weapon durability, but there's so many. I think the difference between something like Halo and its idea of.
I think Mike has to run.
Yeah, I've got a bolt, guys.
Okay.
All right. Hey, great.
Dude, I'm glad you could make it for as long as you could, man.
No, I do.
With work.
Yep. And I got to jump into a call. Guys, everybody in chat, thank you. Have a great night. See you very soon.
Yeah, we're not going to run much longer than another 15-20 anyway, I think. But
okay.
There's a couple of things we want to talk about. But to go back to the Halo, I feel like its forced weapon durability is a little bit less punishing because there's limited weapon types.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but do you feel like the show just suddenly got a lot better? I don't know what it is.
I feel like a weight has been lifted off.
A huge weight. Woo! Like I just got cured of a sickness. Woo!
Yeah,
I can breathe better. I'm sorry, Nick.
I feel like I'm not like Atlas trying to carry everything anymore. You know.
I'm sorry, Nick. You were.
But the reason it kind of works better in something like Halo is there's a more limited range of weapons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be a lot more comfortable with a lot of the weapons that are lying around, or you're going to find when you are comfortable with that you can then just pick up a replacement weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And something like Breath of the Wild, a lot of times you'll get stuck in a fight and you'll kill a guy, a high level guy that took you forever to kill, and you might have broke like 3 weapons, but the weapon he dropped was a mop.
yeah.
And the mop breaks in 1 hit, and you're like, why did I just use 5 guardian weapons to kill you? Why did it take 5 guardian weapons to kill you?
Right.
That's BS. To get a mop.
Yeah.
Which
like I said,
made me look at enemies differently, as in, do I bother with this encounter or not?
Well,
What do I
that's
get
the
if I kill
thing.
you?
That's the argument I've heard for Breath of the Wild, and I happen to like Breath of the Wild a lot. But one of the arguments I've heard is that the whole idea, maybe it's not executed perfectly, but the whole idea behind Breath of the Wild is that idea of evolving in the environment that you're at, constantly looking at what's around you. I agree. I couldn't have said it better myself. So
I
I
had to go
think
to that and then go back with this one because we really do need to talk about this one too.
sure, I'm done rambling in a second, but like to me, the whole, from my understanding, the idea behind Breath of the Wild was that whole idea of conserving, crafting, working with what's around you in the environment. And so I think they may not have executed it perfectly, but I think that was their mindset behind weapon durability. It's that idea of constantly moving forward, adapting where you can, looking at what's around you and moving forward. I do agree, though, that they needed to execute that a little bit better.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like having it on some weapons is okay. I didn't like it with the Master Sword.
Right. Well, you have this thing forged from the gods, and it lasted 5 hits, and it's over. I mean, like not much for the blacksmith. Or if
it was glowing, like around the Guardians and stuff, you could use it. But the Guardians were so fast that 9 times out of 10 you couldn't close to enough range to make it useful.
Yeah, right.
Which made the Guardian weapons better, but you rarely got Guardian weapons back unless you used the amiibos. Or you went into other areas where you need to use more Guardian weapons and you got to get more Guardian weapons back. Like the whole system just seemed kind of broken a little bit in a lot of balance ways. Where you needed Guardian parts to get Guardian weapons, but you had to kill Guardians with Guardian weapons to get Guardian parts to get Guardian weapons. It's like you built this broken cycle that I feel like needs tweaked, right? Or thrown out. I don't care. You can throw it out as far as I'm concerned. I don't like weapon damage. Boss rush in the final stage of Street Fighter 2020. That's not the only game that does that. Most of the Mega Mans do a boss rush to an extent, but they're a little bit more gentle with you than that one, where they just arbitrarily have you fight like boss after boss after boss after boss. Rondo of Blood does that with I want to say Shaft. There's like 3 or 4 bosses that you have to fight in one big gauntlet. That just becomes like, if you're bad at one or you just have bad RNG in a certain extent, you're going to run into a problem. And RNG is another one. Like heavily RNG focused games, I find problematic in general. It's why I can't play roguelikes.
Yeah.
For that reason, because I have notoriously bad luck. You can ask my wife. Like, I can never play a dice game. I'll roll nothing but 1. It's like, unless I need a 1, and then I'll roll like a 12.
Right.
It's like opposite world. So
I think these boss. I mean, I don't like boss rushes at all. But again, you could probably make the argument that if the whole idea behind that game is to that it's challenging and it's hard, I can understand them in those kind of situations. I personally hate them.
Yeah, and then typewriter ribbons. This is another one. A limited save system.
It's completely stupid.
That doesn't make a lot of sense.
No.
I got it from the standpoint that they wanted to have a heightened sense of tension. So I got the concept of where they were going with that. I just felt like I honestly, the Resident Evil games, I feel like I become a hoarder and never use anything because my one big experience, and I've probably told this before, was with Code Veronica. I got to the end boss on the end of disc 1. And I had like nothing to be able to deal with this guy. Like I couldn't find anything to deal with him.
Yeah.
So I literally went back through the entire first disc again, using the knife on anything I could kill with a knife. And had a ton of ammo when I got there. And finally beat the boss with almost no ammo. Like it was way easier when I got there again. And then got to the second part and had like none of those items anymore. They were all gone. Because they flipped me to a totally different character. But that also had the same kind of limited save system, right? And the tank controls, which tank controls need to have a special place in hell, as far as I'm concerned. Those things are awful.
And let me really quickly say about inventory, and this is going to talk to the smallest group ever, probably that's not even in this chat room right now. But one of the things that was famous in Sierra point-and-click adventure games was that you could actually play the game all the way to the end and realize that you didn't pick up the chocolate bar in the first 5 minutes. And so now you can't beat the game. Like that kind of stuff is the most infuriating kind of crap.
I have a similar example to that, and it's more of a funny example because, and this is going to be silly. Monty Python Search for the Holy Grail. You remember that game?
No, I didn't know they had a game.
There was a PC game called Monty Python Search for the Holy Grail.
Wow, I have to play that.
And it had a lot of neat mini games and stuff you could go through. And it was just kind
CD,
of
right? CD-ROM?
Yep. Yeah, it was just kind of funny as you go through. But at the very, very end, every time you booted in, they had a questionnaire, right? Mm-hmm. That I thought was just a gag. And I would always fill in a couple of them and then close it out and they go through the game. Well, I got to the very end. There was a bridge that would not fully form until you filled out the entire 50, 60 questionnaire. I uninstalled. I'm like, you know what? This is a joke taken too far. Bite me, I'm out. and it was just, it felt like it was definitely Monty Python's sense of humor.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I totally get where they were coming from. Yeah. It was just like a bridge too far for me, quite literally and metaphorically. Yeah. I'm like, no. Yeah. I'm out. Yeah. I've had my fun.
Jim makes a good point here.
Yeah, I wanted to leave this one up because the scarce anime and the scarce,
and I agree with this.
The weapon breakage, all that stuff is meant. Because what it did for me in Breath of the Wild wasn't to make me adapt to the situation. Mm-hmm. What it did was make me look at what I'm fighting before I fought it. Mm-hmm. Can I kill these things by dropping something on them and kill enough of them that I'm not going to have to worry about it? What weapons or ammo am I going to get out of these guys? Mm-hmm. Is this fight worth doing, or should I just bypass it? Because mm-hmm. most of the combat, and that's how I played it the first time, you can totally avoid.
Right. Exactly.
You can avoid like 98% of combat outside of the divine beasts and inside the temples where you're going to like get the little items for the stamina capsules and heart capsules. You can avoid pretty much all of it. Dude, there's no reason to do almost any of it.
Yep.
Which was one of the annoyances in the game, and one of the saving graces in the game is I didn't have to do this combat that wasn't benefiting me at all. Mm-hmm. Because 9 times out of 10, the combat didn't benefit me in the slightest.
Yep. Right.
It was completely superfluous to the game, and it wasn't very fun. Mm-hmm. And I've watched people play it, and they're going, wow, look at all this cool stuff you can do. And they're beating on a line out and doing like 15 minutes of just dropping bombs and shooting fire and flying back in the air.
I always avoided them.
And doing all this stuff. And then I go, yeah, that looks dope. And then I look at the Lionel's life bar and it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and I'm like, this is the most pointless combat system ever created.
Yeah.
You've spent 15 minutes beating on this guy, throwing everything in your arsenal, and you've done no damage.
Yeah, and the joke is that it's more powerful than Ganon.
You could have killed Ganon 10 times over in the time it took you to do this.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, I think this, and I'm not going to do it because I know it's slightly off topic. This is a perfect segue in the future of the conversation about easy mode, because this I totally get. And then you could make the argument, oh, well, you should have an easy mode, and that there you don't have ammunition scarcity.
Ammunition, but then plentiful.
Right. But then the question is that is that no longer Resident Evil then? And I think that's a great kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if it's done right, it would still be Resident Evil. Because you wouldn't have to make it to where you have unlimited ammunition or a huge surplus of ammunition. You just have more ammunition than you would have on, say, normal mode. Right?
Sure.
Like there's a few more drops per area. Than there would be otherwise,
or even unlimited saves and stuff like that. But again, I understand the argument. I understand the argument where the noodles. I understand the argument of
just
someone
saying,
"Big
Bad, you get a rusty dagger." That's how I felt Breath of the Wild all the time.
Yeah. I understand the argument of someone saying, "No, the whole point of Resident Evil is that it's supposed to be that tension. We don't want an easy mode. We want you to be, this was the way the game was designed." And I think that's a conversation we should have, on another episode, because I think it's a great conversation to be had.
Soft locks. Soft lock is another good one.
What's that?
The soft lock is where you get you don't
That's
necessarily
the
get
Sierra
killed.
thing I'm talking about. Oh no, okay, continue.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
I was about to say a soft lock is where you get stuck in a spot where
Mhm.
you can't die,
Mhm.
but you
Where
also
you
can't get
can't
out of it.
Well, that's like the Sierra. Okay, that is like the Sierra thing. It's at the
Yeah.
very end. You need the chocolate bar so you can't progress, but you're also not
Right.
dead. Yeah.
Yeah, Sierra games are the worst about making games unwinnable. Yeah.
Yep.
The climb to the top of Hyrule Castle was done by avoiding 90% of the potential fights. Absolutely.
I feel like that was what I did. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's what a lot of people did. I
Mhm.
actually went through and did a good chunk of the fights in there my
Mhm.
next time through, but I went ahead and just approached the game of, okay, I'm still going to pick and choose the fights, but I'm going to force myself to do more fights. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because otherwise, why am I even putting this game in here? Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, I did go through and cheese the last boss because I bought 3 of those self-deflecting shields because I absolutely, out of all the games and all the parry mechanics I've used, and I've learned a lot of them over the
Mhm.
years, Breath of the Wild has the absolute most abysmal parry system in existence.
Interesting, because I didn't have a hard
I
time.
hate it.
I'm wondering if this is stupid, but is there anything maybe potentially with your TV that the lag, the
Dude,
difference?
I don't know, man. I'll see the eyelet flash and I'll try to use that. I'll hear the doot sound and try to do it then, and neither one of those work.
Okay.
And the problem is like it's mostly the Guardians that I had the problem with, right? The stationary ones, usually I can parry once, no big deal. But like I ended up in a couple of situations where when you parry with the Guardians, a lot of times you have to parry 3 times on the live ones,
Mhm.
to where it just
Yeah.
wasn't worth it. It was
Yeah.
not trying to perfect parry 3 times.
Mhm.
And one time I actually did it 4 times in a row. I couldn't believe it. But I missed 3 out of 4 shots on the return.
Okay. Yeah.
Because he literally did this. Doot, doot, doot.
Yeah.
Standing directly in front of me within spitting distance.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm like, it's a laser. How?
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that point, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to use some of these ladder guys, grind up guardian arrows, and then I'm just shooting you in the eye. I'm done with this.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
always had guardian arrows from that point on. I'm like, done. And so I grounded up enough items that I could go in. I could buy 3 of those shields for Ganon because I knew I was going to have to parry on Ganon, right, to be able to deal with his first phase. And then I just held the block button.
Yeah.
And done. I'm like, I'm not learning this mechanic. I've learned to parry in God of War. I learned to parry in Demon Souls. And if you've ever tried to learn to parry in Demon Souls, that crap ain't easy.
Okay.
And I managed to learn that parry mechanic. I learned to parry in Sekiro semi-reliably just through doing the training mode. I learned to parry in Ghost of Tsushima.
So I got to figure out
Can't
what.
do it in Breath of the Wild for some reason.
I played that game, 5 whatever years ago, and I just remember the boss Ganon being so easy. So obviously,
the only part of him that's hard is having to parry that one blast.
right? And I see,
That's
and I
it.
remember that being cake for me. So, and I'm no.
And I'm talking about the Guardians themselves. The Guardians, depending on the range that you're at, the parry timing is vastly different.
Yeah. Yep.
It changes.
Yeah, I remember that being a pain in the butt. The Guardians were tough, if I remember right.
Yeah, collectibles for the sake of collectibles. This just goes into like the whole grind fest of a game and being obsessed with 100%. They serve no purpose. They don't do anything other than just add fluff to the gameplay. But they also eat up developers' time and add to the budget of a game. And this could be a whole topic on itself, like mechanics that we now insist on being in games that just bloat not only the cost of the game, but the time of the game.
But if they're not
minimal benefit,
if they're not, integral to the game, if it's just a thing, if you want to do it, then I don't see any harm in that.
There's no harm in it, but sometimes it becomes overwhelming. And the other thing is bad map systems. And I'm gonna bag. There's one thing I'm gonna bag on Immortals, Phoenix Rising Week, because I actually do love this game.
Yeah.
The map system in that does not let you zoom in enough. It's not a bad map in and of itself, but it locks you so far away, and there's so many items on screen that it becomes almost impossible to see what's going on.
I don't remember if you can.
You can toggle off the ones you've completed, which helps.
Right.
but it
Okay.
still becomes kind of bad sometimes.
Yeah.
And bad map systems in general, like if you're going to design a game and you require people to use a map, you really need to pay attention to your map. There's been
I'm
multiple games I've seen that have had abysmal maps.
I'm replaying Outer Worlds right now because the new version came out, and I remember that as I'm just starting to play. I think that map system, if I remember, it was pretty bad too, and like that just gets in the way. When you have a bad map system, it just gets in the way of the game.
Yeah,
so
some
bad.
of them that are 2-3 dimensional, or I prefer, like, instead of having this big, like Doom was kind of bad about this. It wasn't the worst map I've seen, but it was a 3-dimensional map, right? So it would start you like this, but you'd have to rotate it and try to figure out how you were going to get from here to here to here. I would rather prefer to have like a flat 2D map, right, with markers that say where I can go up and down and then go to that section of it.
Yep.
Or be able to put markers on there myself going, this way down, this way, whatever, and work it that way, as opposed to having this overly elaborate map with all this animated stuff in it. Because sometimes, like, particularly as you zoom out and you're trying to figure out what to do in the map, like with cityscapes and stuff like that, it's really hard to see where you're going, right? And if you don't have a good navigation system, because that's another problem that'll happen with some of these games, is like you'll click on it to go, okay, this is my waypoint, take me here. And then sometimes at the close, I don't know if anybody else has noticed, but you'll get pretty close, but you still can't see it. And then like your little waypoint marker just flips out. Disappears. And you're going, what happened?
Yeah, because you've like technically got there, but it's like 2 stories above you, and so that
or below you, and you have no idea what's going on. There's no indicator. There's nothing.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Was that yours, or did someone in the chat say? Because I agree.
Actually, the map one I think was just me, because
that is a very good one.
Yeah, I mean that's an easily fixable thing. Pat, I don't know what you mean by I wish they would make a Tron one. A Tron what? I think I missed part of a conversation.
Yeah, he may have been talking to someone.
He might have. I thought he was directing at us, and it's fine, and I would love to answer, but I don't know. Historian, but hotter.
That's a good one. Yes. What a great
if you
point.
don't have enough, and it's easy to, and Immortals is actually really good about this, but you can also screw it up if you're not careful. If you don't use the bumpers to change the markers, you could screw yourself on this a lot. And I've done that before. This is where we're going to get Breath of the Wild a lot of.
Breath of the Wild is great
because they only gave you so many, and they were all different colors, and they were very distinct and very noticeable, even during daylight.
But it was also so perfect in that that idea that I just happened to see I think there's going to be a secret here that I need to come back later, and you'd be able to put that there, like,
and you could put like a little leaf or whatever on there. It was very easy to navigate and use that map. It was very easy to use the markers and clear them up. They did an amazing job on the map system.
Agreed completely.
You won't hear me complain about. That's one of the few things you will not hear me complain about Breath of the Wild. Just the map system. They did a brilliant job on that. Also, just the animation and the graphical style of it, I think, is wonderful in that game. It's a beautiful game to exist in that world. I just wish it was a more fun world to play in, as beautiful as it is.
You're Breath of the Wild, you're saying?
Yes.
See, like, I happen to love Breath of the Wild for them almost top to bottom, and it was refreshing. I have to say, it's actually refreshing when I came on here that so many of you guys had a lot of criticism. I think that's good, like, because most people will just say, "Oh, well, game of the century," and it's nice to hear some criticism. I actually really appreciate that.
Well, I mean, and most of my criticism are just small little things that they could fix.
It'll be interesting to see if they fix
that become exaggerated during a long play session, and particularly when you start looking at the weather. A lot of mine has to do with the weather in Breath of the Wild, which one of the guys who, and absolutely. Trophies and achievements are great, and I find sometimes I get too fixated on them, and I have to take a step back. Like, Immortals has so many achievements, and I'd already missed a few of them, and I'm just like, you know what? I have to get out of this mindset of doing all the sub stuff and realize when I've gotten my enjoyment of this game and finished the story and enjoy the story I got. Right?
Yeah, because
and
it's
then
all
maybe
optional.
come back and do some of this stuff later. Maybe I'll do it New Game Plus. Maybe I'll just continue with this game, whatever. But I got like 60 hours in that game, and I don't regret dumping 60 hours in that game. I had a blast with that game. At first, I was pretty disappointed in the last boss fight, or what I thought was the last boss fight.
Right. Yeah.
Because I lit into him so fast. I'm like, I looked at my wife and I go, "That's it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, really?" And then it kept going, and I'm like, okay, so I'm finally going to get the fight that I kind of had imagined in my head.
Yeah.
Right? Finally.
Yeah.
You know, I thought the last dungeon area was a little arbitrarily annoying.
That one's intense.
That was a little much, I
Yeah.
thought. It wasn't too terrible, but it was pretty annoying after I'd gone through as much as I'd gone through to have to do that, to do the fight all over again. But the fight itself, I thought was pretty worth it. I liked how they played in with everybody you had helped, and everybody kind of showed up, and you had your big part to play, and then I thought the ending was really nice. So it was worth it in the end to push through it and to see the ending of that game. And I'm deliberately dancing around it if any of you guys sit down and play it, because for any of you that had problems with weapon breakage or weather, not enough differences in side quests and things to do, having to constantly cook food, but not being able to cook food because of the weather, because for some reason you can only cook outside. Nobody in Hyrule's invented a stove for some unknown reason. All those things go away. Pretty much.
I think the best way of looking at it is like Breath of the Wild is like Gran Turismo, is like a racing simulator, and then Phoenix Rising is like an arcade racer. It's all the things that Breath of the Wild is, but just more arcade fun. Like it's just more to the point, more to fun. None of the hassle or the things that got you annoyed from Breath of the Wild.
Right. And honestly, it kind of reminded me of Breath of the Wild 2.0, right? Like somebody listened to all the complaints that people had on Breath of the Wild and went, well, we don't need that.
Yeah,
and just removed it.
Yep.
And they streamlined the system.
That's why I thought you'd like it, because like I remember hearing all your complaints of Breath of the Wild. Oh, then I think you'll love this game.
The one thing that I didn't like about it, that I thought was a little bit too heavy-handed on it, that Breath of the Wild wasn't as bad about, was stamina usage. Stamina usage, even at max stamina in Immortals, is really heavy-handed. Like the Ares Wrath will use almost an entire bar on its own. There's no good way to limit that. There's certain techniques you have to do that become very painful, and even the stamina potions don't necessarily help you in a lot of those cases. So the stamina would be one minor complaint on that there's not enough of it, or it's not. They use too much of it for certain moves, right? Whereas Breath of the Wild hits that balance of when you increase your stamina bar, it feels significant.
Yes.
Like it's significantly different.
Yes.
I never felt that way with Immortals. I did, but it took a very long time. Like instead of getting part of a stamina bar and feeling like, man, I could just go for days now, I had to get a whole bar, which was a lot of Tartarus dungeons and crawling to do that. To feel more empowered, right, in that respect. So I was a little put off by that. That would be the one thing where I'd go, Breath of the Wild really kind of nailed this part, whereas Phoenix didn't quite dial it in as well as it could have.
Yeah, and it's a shame because all it is just a little adjustment, and then that game,
it's a really minor adjustment. And Para is correct. It almost she watched me play this game. It rained almost constantly. Half the time it was a lightning storm. And like I'm running around with like no gear on, watching everybody else shoot me with everything, and I have any of these problems because I can't fight you right now because it's a lightning storm for the next 3 days of game. It is so bad. Why game systems are great to be unbreakable as they can be. And if they're not, they get on nerves and patches later. However, single player games don't want to be able to break systems. I can see that. Certain systems, when they patch things, like if you have a strictly single player game where you can have this super like power trip kind of thing, and then it gets squashed out, I feel like a lot of times that removes some of the fun, but you
Mhm.
can also tweak that too far the other way. Like, let's look at Diablo 3 for a second. Diablo 3 went from having no power creep and having to buy everything on the real auction house, only to get nowhere in the game, to having
Right.
their Loot 2.0 system introduced when it finally launched on console and they decided they wanted to sell the game for a change.
Yeah.
Because everybody was bagging it on a PC because there was no good loot system.
Yeah.
There was no good way to get loot. Everybody was spending real money instead of giving it to Blizzard, which is what they intended, to go out to the auction house to buy these items. They were buying gold from Chinese farmers who also controlled the market and were charging like $10 million. So we were buying their gold to give them their gold back
Yeah.
to get the one item. And they created this nightmare system. It was awful.
Mm-hmm. I know. Yeah.
Anybody that played that game early on PC knew this game was broken from this loot system, right? It didn't feel like Diablo. When they introduced the Loot 2.0 system and introduced some sets and tailored the gear more towards the player, that power creep started to happen. The game started to level out. You started to be able to get further in the in-game like dungeons that was built up progression and be able to grind your gear up. It started to feel pretty balanced, and then it skewed a little bit, and then they more and more they started to blow the lid off of that, right, to where the power creep just got stupid, and a lot of the challenge washed out of the game.
Yeah.
Right now, the game is just the power creep's gotten too far, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find a way to let the player feel empowered and kind of break the game a little, right?
Mm-hmm.
To where you can overpower yourself, you can overcompensate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mass Effect had a good system like that. Once you got so much money, you got access to like this uber black market items, right? Weapons.
Right.
And they totally broke the game. So if you put the time in, you could radically break the game. I found it completely on accident because I was being OCD. Going for all the heavy metals and the gases and all that stuff. And all of a sudden I had all these uber weapons like less than halfway through the game. And just coasted.
That's what I was doing. Yeah.
Everything till like the very last boss, who was still a challenge, which I was kind of happy about because the rest of the game had just gotten stupid easy. So being able to still have a challenge out of that last boss meant they actually thought about these weapons at some point and said, okay, we're going to have the power creep stop here, and then it's going to really level out, and you're going to have a challenge for this last part, right? So you got your power creep, you were able to coast, you broke your curve, and then we're going to level it out so that you get the experience we want you to have at the end of the game, right? And I feel like that's a good way to do it. They let you break the game a little,
right,
by design, and then they reeled you back in a little bit to make it feel more sensible.
And I'll say real quickly to the geek historian in you, something to look into, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. There's a great book called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
I keep meaning to pick that up. I've seen it.
It's a great book, amazing book. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that Diablo 3, that everything you were talking about, I believe, is discussed in there, and it's the whole history of how that happened, how they fixed it. Anyway, so that's something for you in the chat maybe to look into. It's a really good book.
So one of the things I want to do, because we should probably wrap up because I want to spend some time with my wife and then piss out.
Sure.
One of the things I do want to start posing to the chat, and I may bring you back on for this one too, because I want to start doing something on this podcast where, since this is every other week, this would give people enough time to kind of do sort of an exercise that I think might be fun. And I'll field it out to you guys and see what you think about it. And
Kegels, because I've been doing them the whole time.
Well, I've been doing those constantly since we've been on the podcast, but I don't know what you've been doing. But one of the things I think would be neat to do is just kind of a general exercise for the chat and us is to pick a game that we go through and we play. So you spend no more. It doesn't even have to be very long. You spend as long as you want, but I'd say 30 minutes. Turn your phone off. Just say, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. This is just going to be me focusing on this for like 30 minutes. I figure almost everybody can carve out at least 30 minutes, right? In a 2-week time period. And look at and experience the game for a little bit. It'll probably be like an older game. It could be anywhere from like NES all the way up to say like PS1, right? Era games. Maybe PS2 if we want to include that. Look at what you're playing. Look at how it feels. Look at how it plays. Look at the kind of mechanics that are in there. What's being done here that either has been done better since then and has been built upon, or what could be taken from the earlier game and be implied into the newer game to make the newer game better? What can we learn from things that came before that could be reapplied in new games to make them a little bit cleaner, a little bit better, a little bit more fun and intuitive, right? Because that's kind of what this channel's about, and that's kind of what RetroRoots was originally about, was meant to kind of take lessons from the past and apply them and see where they took us and see what's still back here that maybe we left behind or tweaked to the point to where it no longer works. Where was that tipping point, and how can we course correct moving forward?
That is a great idea.
Yeah. So I think that would be a cool idea. So I don't have a specific game in mind right now, Jim, because we were scrambling to throw this together till like the last minute, quite frankly, because everything went pear-shaped. So I didn't have time to talk to the guys about this. So I'll probably
maybe the chat does the chat have some ideas?
If the chat has some ideas, throw them up. I'll probably throw something up on the community tab and let you guys put in suggestions, and then I'll throw them up to the rest of the people that are probably going to be on the panel. Yes, I'm giving you homework.
But it's the most fun homework ever.
But I think it would be neat to kind of take some of these ideas, and it would be a good discussion point to kind of either begin a podcast with or end a podcast with. We just set time limit, we stop, and then we talk about that, right? And it kind of wraps up or starts off where we're going. And it's something fun and interactive that you guys can kind of do with us that also keeps us all our reviews homework sucks. It's like something a homebrewer mentioned when you take X game that's regarded as bad or broken and make it good, right? So great. We could even do an exercise where we take a bad game and go, all right, this is broken, but what do I feel like is broken with it, and what do you feel like is broken with it? How would we fix that?
Bubsy 3D, everything.
Well, and honestly, that's actually a great way to do that exercise, because we spend a lot of time these days revisiting games that were already good and remaking them with modern graphics and adding nice current day niceties to them, quality of life improvements, so to speak, right? But we skip a lot of the bad games. Nobody goes back and looks at the bad game and goes, this was a really cool idea, but man, it sucked.
Yeah, the execution.
How do I make that not suck?
Yeah,
to where that's the game I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And those are the remakes and reboots and revisits I feel like should happen more. Right? Where the core idea of the game could have been great, but the execution was so bad that it just nobody ever touched it again. Or the franchise again. It was just doomed.
Yeah, even in this entry. And this is, I know this is not what you're talking about, but
like really past. So everything started.
I think like even a micro version of that. They looked at Wind Waker, the sailing system, and in the remake they made some changes to make that system far better.
And Metro Prime's another example of that. I actually thought the Wii motion controls in Metro Prime 3 worked great. I think the dual stick, I haven't started my copy of Prime. I do have a copy of Prime. I do mean to start it. I have played a little bit with the dual analogs. I'm going to put so many pictures on Twitter now. I thought the right analog stick sometimes was too slow and then too fast and then too slow. So it's like something's off with the balance, but it's way better than the original GameCube version where I'm having to hit the Z button and be stopped and then aim and then having to do all this stuff. And you can still target lock, which is great too. So you can get to a certain point and then target lock and get to a certain point and target lock. But having that second analog stick is a big deal. For a lot of us that were playing Xbox before we played the GameCube, it was very hard to adjust to the GameCube doing it that way. Because we were so used to Halo. And if we hadn't had Halo, I don't think anybody would have thought about it. If you just jumped from like PS1 into the GameCube, I don't think you even would have batted an eye. I think it would have just felt normal.
Well, for me it was because I was at that time I was only playing Nintendo stuff. So for me, I graduated to that effortlessly. But I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Had I come backwards, absolutely not backwards.
Yeah,
Had I
we
went
spent a
from I'm
lot of
sorry.
time revisiting games because some are released, broken, and then fixed after the fact. That's a modern problem, not a retro one. But there's some retro games by certain companies that just didn't put in effort, didn't have the time, weren't able to complete it properly, and some of them are just bad,
Mhm.
right? Or you go back and you play them and go, I played this a lot when I was a kid, and I remember thinking it was great, but now I'm coming back and playing it, and this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. This has all been improved moving forward. Could you take something like this and make it better?
Yeah, I think that's a great. That's
So I
fun.
think it's a cool exercise to do. So what I'll probably do is sometime in the next 2 weeks, I'll put up something in the community tab on this channel that you guys can all visit and go and put in your suggestions. And what I'll do is I'll probably collate a lot of those suggestions, especially some of the most common ones,
Mhm.
and then run them by some of the guys and make sure that, the majority, and then maybe make a poll and say, okay, which one of these do you guys have, right?
Mhm.
And whichever one has the most votes, that's probably what we go. That way we can get the most audience participation, because I don't want
Yeah.
to throw some hyper niche game out that only like 2 people have
Yeah.
in the entirety of the audience. I'd rather it be something that a lot of people are going to be able to either get their hands on, either a physical copy or a ROM copy, whatever your choice is. I don't really care if you use. I'm not an emulation Nazi. I don't care. I use emulation all the time. I'm a big fan of original hardware. If you got it, use it. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
Mhm.
But I don't want to force anybody into anything, and I don't want people being left out because it's a super rare game. Like I probably wouldn't pick Little Samson, right? Because I could emulate that fine, and it would be fine for me. But somebody who insists on playing original hardware doesn't want to pay $1,000 for a copy of the physical game, right? Doesn't have it and
Mhm.
won't emulate it, right? So that leaves them out of the loop on a game that's just prohibitively expensive,
Yeah.
right? It's super hard to find anyway. So that would probably not be one that would be visited for that
And
reason.
the good thing about all the audience suggestion too is that you can build a backlog. Just because they didn't win this time doesn't mean that
Right.
we
Doesn't
can't
mean it
use
can't
that.
come
Yeah.
up. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it could be a semi-regular thing. I don't know how frequently we would do it, and I haven't run it by Mike. It was just an idea I had that I
Oh, you
think
don't need
Mike
it.
will get behind it. I think it'll. No, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal.
You don't have to run anything by him. It's
I think you're
approved.
gonna have
Let's
the
do
worst
it.
interpretation depending on the Mario movie you're talking about. Okay, so we're talking about the Mario movie. The game has stopped that Roach from the original Game Boy. But at this point, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We're down to like 10 people in chat. You guys have been awesome tonight.
Yeah, it's
We've
a lot
had
of
a
fun.
huge amount of participation most of the night. I think we were as high as like 22 people at one point, and we were like 15, 16 strong most of the evening.
Right.
So yeah, this became a cool topic that I think a lot of people were into. There was a lot of really good conversation, a lot of really good suggestions in chat.
No,
We
you have a
probably
great
went,
chat.
yeah, it was a great chat tonight. You
Mhm.
guys were phenomenal. As always, we wouldn't be here doing this if it wasn't for you guys. We'd be doing other things. You guys are what make this fun and keeps us coming back to this every other week. I would say week after week, but we don't do this every week. Hopefully, Mike will be here next time. I would love to continue to have Panda on the show if he's willing. If not, I do need to find somebody else who can be sort of like a regular on here that is okay with the schedule. So if you guys know anybody or you're interested in that, let me know and I'll run it by Mike, because I don't do anything just unilaterally on this podcast. This is kind of a group thing. I need to make sure that whoever comes on is good with the rest of the group and the rest of the group is okay with them, because I'm not going to start static with people that are already here for the sake of a new podcast member. Most of the people we have in chat would not be an issue. So if you're interested, let me know. You guys all know kind of how to reach out to me, or if not, people who can reach out to me and I will get back to you. But for now, we're going to go ahead and sign out. This has been an awesome evening. Thank you so much for hanging out. And until next time, happy gaming.
Adios, muchachos.